Sup folks, welcome to the part 7, of What If Deku Run an Orphanage, Chapter 37. Battle of Fire and Ice and a Dragon. Hey sorry, it took me so long to update. The snowstorm meant I had to shovel a lot, and that took a bit of a toll on me. Anyway, some people got the wrong idea about the exercise. They're not gonna be rescuing Izuku each time, that was just for Kai's exercise. Each test will different for each kid, with different objectives. Team B, that being, Todoroki, Asui, Aoyama, and Momo, stood in the fake city, waiting anxiously for the exercise to start. Well, except Todoroki, who didn't seem to be nervous at all. "You're rather calm, Todoroki," Asui pointed out. "Aren't you at least a bit nervous about what they could throw at us after seeing the first round, Kero?" "My ice can deal with whatever they throw at us," Todoroki said confidently, yet, still using his typically icy tone. "You've met Midoriya and his children before, haven't you? Do you know what they might throw at us?" Asui shook her head. "I haven't seen Midoriya in a while, and thanks to his deal with DOC he's probably gotten quite a few new kids in the meanwhile. And even if he didn't, I wouldn't know which one of the kids I saw they could send at us." Todoroki didn't respond. "Even with your incredible quirk, I don't think we can rely on that alone," Momo spoke up. "After all, we can't harm the child in any way, so I'm not sure we can rely on power alone to secure victory. My ice can also be a good tool to capture and immobilized," Shida responded. "Unless the kid has some insanely powerful fire quirk, then we should be fine." But I think you are forgetting something," Aoyama said. Whoosh. Suddenly, from a few miles away, a massive pillar of flames erupted, piercing the sky with fire. It was so powerful it even caused the ground to shake slightly. "Nezu is a sadist," Aoyama finished. "TCH. Todoroki grits his teeth. Let's go." Back in the observation room, the class watched as Nezu was revealed on screen, in all his flaming glory. "He's new, right? I've never seen him before," Okako pointed out. Yes, Nezu came in the last batch of children. He has a really powerful fire quirk that's really hard to control. He can already reach temperatures that rival Endeavor's, without even using any of the techniques Endeavor uses to increase his fire's heat," Izuku revealed, causing some of the class to balk in awe. "That's insane," Mineta shouted out in fear. "Although I suppose it should be expected for someone who comes from a home for overly dangerous children," Tokoyami pointed out. "Yeah, no kidding," Mina agreed. Back in the city burn, Nezu shouted as he incinerated 5 wolves in a wave of fire. Yeah. Nezu knew today was gonna be fun. Being part of an exercise at UA already sounded fun, but then he was told exactly what his role was. His role being, use as much excessive force as possible and incinerate anything that moved, while Grim came at him in massive numbers. And so he flew around, burning away any Grim he found. Until he stumbled upon Team B, running towards him. "Alright. Let's see how strong UA students are." Without any explanation, Nezu brought his hand together and unleashed a fireball the size of a car at the 4 of them. While Asui, Momo, and Aoyama froze in fear, Todoroki froze the area in front of them, creating a massive icy wall that blocked the fireball, and caused steam to cover the ground. "Hey, I can't see," Nezu complained, before remembering his lines. "You won't hurt me, villains. You and your monsters won't beat my fire." Nezu started throwing fireballs, wildly, in every direction, absolutely destroying the environment around them. Todoroki kept up his ice wall, having to constantly reinforce it to keep up with the insanely hot flames. It was a mistake to underestimate them. Todoroki grit his teeth as the constant shift between cold and hot made his head spin. "We can't even get close," Momo said. "I told you, OCPs live up to their names," Asui said, keeping her distance from the ice. "Yes, but it appears we have other problems," Aoyama said, looking up. The other two turned around, while Todoroki kept his focus on keeping the fire at bay. They looked up behind them and all of them froze at what they saw. Roar! In the sky was a massive, grim dragon. Back in the observation room. "Is that a fucking dragon?" Kaminari asked as everyone looked to the screen in awe. So he actually made it. Izuku stared at the beast his son had created. It was about half the size of Kai, maybe a bit more, and looked absolutely terrifying. "This is Yami's quirk?" Ida was in shock. He remembered the little boy he escorted through the amusement park and couldn't imagine that such a small boy could make something like this. "Yeah, he showed me design like this before as a drawing. He said it took way too much negative energy to create." Izuku explained. "Negative energy?" Shoji asked. "Yami's quirk allows him to absorb people's negative emotions, and turn it into some kind of energy that he can then turn into the Grim." Izuku clarified. "So in short, he can turn people's inner demons into outer demons." Tokoyami summarized. "Basically," Izuku confirmed. "That's crazy. He could build a huge army of monsters, and attack a city. And then all the anger and sadness and fear would let him make more and more. He could take over the world." Mineta shouted, over-exaggerating. "I don't like to think about it that way, and I don't think he could do all that. He could certainly cause quite a bit of destruction," Izuku admitted, seeming almost pained to do so. "Wait, is that thing making more grim?" Mina asked as she pointed at the screen. Back with Team B. Team B watched in horror as the dragon's back bubbled, and sludge fell off the dragon onto the ground. The sludge changed shape until it had turned into two grim griffins. "Okay, that is ridiculous." Asui knew that Nezu was a sadist, everyone did, but how did he expect them to actually beat this thing? The griffins came at them, and the students had to be ready for it. Aoyama shot his laser at one of the griffin's heads, disorienting it, allowed Asui to jump up and wrap her tongue around it and slam it into the other griffin. Momo made a cannon and blasted both Grim, destroying them. "We need to figure out how we're gonna take out the dragon," Momo shouted to her teammates. Then the dragon itself came down at them with its giant maw open. But before it could reach them, it was hit in the face by a powerful flamethrower attack from Netsu, who had flown around the ice to attack the dragon. The dragon flew away from Netsu's attack, higher into the sky, coming away from it with some burn marks and slight melting on his mask. Netsu followed the dragon up into the sky, leaving the hero students behind. "We have to help him. If we help him against the dragon, then we can convince him that we're not villains, at least in the context of the test," Momo reasoned. "Ragu." More Grim came charging at the students, mostly by wolves followed by some Ursa. "Todoroki, you and Aoyama should focus on the dragon and the child. Asui and I will take care of the monsters down here," Momo said, creating a spear. "Right." Todoroki grabbed Aoyama and created a pillar of ice under them, that rose them higher and higher into the sky. When they finally reached the dragon, Netsu was chasing it, flying in a very sloppy fashion while shooting fireballs everywhere. Todoroki made another ice wall to block a stray fireball, and from behind them one of the griffins flew at them. "I don't think so, monster." Aoyama unleashed the most powerful naval blast he could right at the griffin, destroying its head and killing it. "I'll focus on the dragon, keep those griffins off me," Todoroki ordered. Aoyama dreaded how his stomach would feel when this was all over. Todoroki tried to make a trail of ice leading to the dragon, but Netsu's fireballs kept destroying it. I can't afford to hold back," Todoroki thought. If he was gonna fight this thing while Netsu was around, then he would have to use the full capability of his mother's quirk. And so while Aoyama shot the griffins out of the air, Todoroki waited patiently for the dragon to get closer. Netsu chased the dragon around with its flamethrower, until eventually, the dragon flew only a few feet away from Todoroki. In an instant, Todoroki made a massive iceberg that completely swallowed the dragon. "Whoa!" Netsu stopped for a moment, surprised by the sudden appearance of the iceberg. Crack! However, the iceberg wouldn't stay there for long, as the bridge Todoroki had made was too small to hold the weight of the massive iceberg, and it was about to collapse. Todoroki ran back to the ice platform, with Aoyama following. He could feel the frostbite nipping at his fingers and at his sides, but he had more important things to worry about. Because the iceberg was above Asui and Momo. "Asui, Yaozu, move!" Todoroki shouted into his earpiece. Crack! The ice broke, and the iceberg went hurtling downwards. Meanwhile, back on the ground, Asui drop-kicked an Ursa to death, and Momo was impaling a Beowulf when they heard Todoroki's warning. "There's an iceberg about to crash on you two. Move!" Todoroki told them through the earpiece. Momo and Asui could quickly see the shadow of the iceberg, getting bigger and bigger very quickly as it approached them at an alarming rate. Asui acted quickly, and grabbed Momo with her tongue, and made broad leaps away from where they were. Crash! The iceberg hit the ground, only a little less than a dozen feet from where the two girls were. The impact broke the ice apart into hundreds of thousands of little pieces, that flew through the air like pieces of shrapnel. Momo made a shield, and blocked the ice shards, protecting both her and Asui from harm. When all was said and done, all that was left of the iceberg were chunks of ice and a cool mist that covered the ground. Did that do it? Momo asked hopefully. A few moments later, her question was answered, when a giant black figure emerged from the mist. Roar! The dragon rose up from the mist, towering over the two girls. It was damaged, with some burn marks and melted parts from Netsu's attacks, as well as cracks in its armor and cuts in its skin from being trapped in the ice and falling to the ground. The worst of its injuries were its wings. Now cut up, and filled with holes, they would no longer be suited for flight. Momo stepped back from the intimating beast, but as she did so she noticed that Asui was not doing the same, instead seeming groggy. All the frosty mist was making the frog girl very sleepy, and she was doing her best to keep from falling asleep, but she was very out of it. The dragon seemed to notice this, and charged at her, opening its massive maw to swallow her whole. Momo jumped at her classmate, moving her out of the way just in time for the dragon to miss her. The dragon turned its head towards the two down girls, and let out another fearsome roar. With the monster upon them and with Asui completely out of it and on the ground, Momo knew she couldn't dodge anymore and had to come up with another strategy. She quickly made a flare gun and shot it right in the dragon's face. The flare exploded in the dragon's eyes, not doing any damage but causing it close its eyes and flail its head around wildly, as it stumbled backward. Momo kept shot it in the face 2 more times, causing it to keep stumbling back. Unfortunately, Momo had run out of flares. She lifted up Asui and hoped to get away from the dragon while it was still stunned. But the dragon recovered before she got far. With its jaw open, it rushed at the two. And then a massive chunk of ice fell on its head. Todoroki! Momo shouted. The half-and-half teen himself came down with Aoyama on an ice slide, and the two of them ran over to their teammates. "We are glad to see you, two were not crushed," Aoyama told them. "I apologize, I should have known the ice would fall," Todoroki said before he noticed the now unconscious Asui. "Is she injured?" "No, it seems like all this cold sent her into some sort of hibernation. She most likely won't wake up until we get her somewhere warmer." Roar! The dragon still wasn't done and rose up once more. The armor on its head was now heavily damaged, looking like it was about to fall apart. "Tch. Just stay down." Todoroki shivered from the ice crawling up his right side but released another wave of ice at the creature regardless. The ice covered the dragon once more, however this time the ice was weaker, due to Todoroki overusing his quirk, and the dragon quickly started breaking through. Momo saw that Todoroki was about to unleash another attack, and stopped him by putting her hand out in front of him. "You're shivering, we should retreat." "I'm fine," Todoroki insisted. "I know now may not be the best time to bring this up, but where is the boy?" Aoyama asked. Floom. Suddenly from the sky, A giant wall of flames slammed into the dragon so hard it knocked all 3 students off their feet and blew them away. Todoroki made some ice to stop them from getting blown away any further, and an ice wall in front of them to protect them from the heat. Ugh! Todoroki struggled to maintain all the ice. The heat poured through, curing his frostbite but also making them all sweat intensely. Aoyama even passed out from the heat due to the fact he was in a suit of armor that only made the problem worse. They couldn't even look directly at the fire because it was so bright it would have blinded them. This went on for half a minute until the flames died out. Where the dragon once was now nothing but scorched earth and black smoke. Todoroki and Momo, after taking a few moments to get their bearings, got up and picked up their unconscious classmates. Is it over? Momo asked. Back in the observation room. Holy shit, Kaminari said in awe. That kid just nuked the dragon. Jiro gaped, sharing her classmates' sense of awe. I told you Netsu's quirk was powerful. Although this is the first time I've seen him use an attack like this. Izuku was also surprised, but to a much lesser extent. This is he going to be alright? Surely an attack of this level must have some toll on his body? Ida asked, concerned for the boy's well-being. Izuku shook his head. Netsu's quirk has very little direct drawbacks. It's very hard for him to control and can cause a lot of property damage. But the only negative effects it can have on himself is if he breathes in the smoke, or if he's in a confined space and burns up all his oxygen. But in wide open spaces like this, he's pretty much fine so long as he's careful. Although the lack of control over his quirk can make his ability to fly pretty sloppy and can cause him to on-screen. The students saw Netsu try to land, only to smack into the ground face first. Crash, can we please get him to Recovery Girl as soon as possible? Izuku said with concern. Of course. Nezu leaned over to the microphone. Will some medical bots please take Netsu, Midoriya, Asui, and Aoyama to Recovery Girl, and will Mr. Todoroki and Miss Yaozu come back to the observation room? After a few minutes, Netsu, Aoyama, and Asui had all been carted off to Recovery Girl. Asui was just asleep and relatively unharmed. Netsu broke his nose and was healed with Recovery Girl's quirk and was now taking a nap. And Aoyama had been overheated, so he was taken out of his armor and treated. The rest of the class, minus Bakugo, who was also still with Recovery Girl, was in the observation room. Alright, while you did technically pass the test, if this was a real situation, you two would have failed, Nezu told them, much to the 2 students' shock. If you were paying attention, you'll notice the Grim made no attempt to attack Netsu. This was because obviously, we didn't want the young man to be harmed, but if this was a real situation, the villain would have obviously fought back. You allowed the child to fight the villain by himself for far too long. A moment that comes to mind is when Mr. Todoroki allowed the child to lure the dragon close to him, rather than attempting to lure him close, or attack with his own flames. Todoroki flinched but didn't respond. That's of course not even mentioning all the property damage and the fact that dropping an iceberg from that height would most likely harm if not kill civilians or allies. Nezu continued. The only reason I am no failing you all is because of the difficulty of the test. We understand. We will perform better next time, Principal Nezu. Momo said with an embarrassed bow. Todoroki did not respond. What is going on with him? Izuku wondered. He didn't use his fire at all during that test. I wonder why? Now with that done, let us move on to the next test. Nezu looked at Team C, who by now were very, very nervous. As they should be. Chapter 38. Hey, guys, I just released a spin-off of this story. It details what this story might look like 7 years in the future. That's 7 years in universe, not 7 years in the real world. It's called I Don't Run an Orphanage Future. Also, there have been some revelations in the MHA canon that will make things troublesome for my stories. Now, this is nothing new. MHA has a tendency not to fully explain itself, and as such fanfic writers tend to fill in the blanks themselves. However, when the canon eventually fills those blanks, then that's where the fanfics tend to differ from canon in ways not meant by the writer. Spoilers for the, as of time of writing this, newest chapter of MHA. So as turns out, a fact can only be given out to quirkless people, otherwise, the new user will prematurely die. Now, as you may have figured out, this would cause some problems for ... well, a few of my fics. Now how am I going to handle this in my fics? Well, it's gonna be different depending on the fic. For this fic, I'm just gonna ignore it. Yeah, this is mostly a happy fluff fic most of the time, and suddenly having the plot revelation that Okuko's living on a time limit because of her power like she's Lysidia from Fire Emblem is a bit too dark. So in this story ... that factor does not exist. Don't worry about it. Also, you may have noticed that I stopped responding to PMs regarding OCS. Don't worry, I'm still allowing people's OCS into the story, I'm just handling it differently. I'm only going to respond to OC submissions when I add new characters. I know that method is a bit slow, but I have 64 PMs right now, and if I tried to deal with them all at once I would go insane. One more thing to mention? Since last month was rough for me and this month is my birth month, I'm taking a bit of a break from my fics, for the most part, to work on a passion project. It's a lot of work and requires a lot of attention, so sorry if you don't hear from me for a while. Anyway, on to the chapter. Now, before you start, this match will have a special change in rules. Nezu told them, looking at Team C. For this match, you are able to attack the children, but you are not allowed to harm them. The entire class looked at the principal in confusion. Am I stupid, or isn't it the same thing? Kaminari asked. You are stupid, but yeah, it does sound like the same thing, Jiro said. I'm afraid I don't understand, sir. What do you mean by this? Ida asked his principal politely. That you will have to figure out on your own, Nezu said with a small sadistic laugh. Well ... we're fucked. Shinso thought. Izuku looked at Uraraka, who was deep in thought. I wonder if she figured it out? A bit later in the fake city, Team C had been walking through the city for a few minutes, and still had yet to see the child. Which was weird considering that from what they'd seen these kids weren't exactly hard to find. But despite this, Jiro looked extremely nervous. Jiro, what's wrong? Shoji asked her using one of his arm's mouths. I can't hear them, Jiro revealed. You can't hear what? Shinso asked her. Those monsters. Shouldn't there be a ton of them around us or at least a few miles away ... but I don't hear anything. It's completely silent. Jiro said, thoroughly unnerved. Maybe they are waiting for the child? Shoji theorized, before looking at Uraraka. Uraraka, do you know who the child we're facing might be? Everyone looked at Uraraka, and the ninth wielder paused as she considered what she was about to say. Well ... I think I might know, but I'm not sure. It's better than nothing, Shinso told her. At least we might have an idea what we're going up against ... When the principal said that we can't harm them but we can attack them, maybe he meant that even if we attack them, harming them won't be that easy. Okuko speculated. Two of the kids had quirks that made them almost impossible to hurt them. Fu and Sanson. What do you mean, impossible to hurt them? Jiro asked, her eyes widened with alarm at the thought of facing an invisible enemy. Not impossible, just really, really hard, said a voice behind them. The three of them immediately turned around and saw Fu standing there, with his typical blank expression. Fu. It is you. Okuko said with a bright expression on her face and relief filling her voice. Hi, Uraraka. It's nice to see you. Fu greeted in his usual monotone. It's been a while. Back in the observation room. Wait a minute, I know him. Mina shouted out, pointing at Fu on the screen. Why you do? Izuku asked, looking at the pink head in confusion. Yeah, I saw him in Kiba's videos. Taru exclaimed excitedly. Wait a minute. Are you Kiba's dad? Is someone gonna fight Kiba? Well, yes, and kind of. She is here and she will be part of the exercise, but you can't really fight her because well, you can't attack her. Izuku explained, nervously. That's amazing. Mina and Taru had stars in their eyes, excited at the prospect of meeting their favorite online celebrity. Wait, if you watch Kiba's videos, then why didn't you recognize any of the other kids? They're in her videos too. Izuku asked. Oh, we only just found out about her. We watched a few videos but we didn't see anyone but her. Taru explained. But I can't wait to watch the rest. So have you seen Fu and Kiba's quirks? Izuku asked hopefully. Nope, I've only watched her gaming stream. Taru revealed. I saw Kiba's quirk but not Fu's, Mina admitted. She has a please do not tell the class about her quirk. I would like to keep it a surprise if possible. Nezu told her. Sadist. Went through the minds of most of the students after hearing that. Izuku just sighed in disappointment. He had hoped that at least one person would have seen Fu's quirk. Because he was well aware of how grotesque Fu's quirk could be, and it tended to make things complicated. It was one of the reasons that Kiba's channel was often described as Gapmo. On one hand, you had Kiba's adorableness and super endearing personality, then on the other hand you'd see her rip Fu's head off and a fountain of blood burst from his neck stump. It put a lot of people off. They've been really nice so far, so hopefully, nothing goes wrong. Izuku crossed his fingers. Back with Team C. You haven't visited in a while. Fu pointed out, still talking to Uraraka. Hee, yeah, I've been really busy. Aizawa-sensei gave us so much work. Uraraka sheepishly complained. You should come over, Dad S. Let's talk about it later. Fu realized that this wasn't the time or place to be talking about this. Surrender, heroes. You're surrounded. The team looked around and saw nothing. Kid, do you know what the word surrounded means? Shinso asked the child. Yup, Fu answered. We do. And then, Jiro's eyes widened. Guys. I hear something. Below us. Then the ground started to shake. And that's when the Grim suddenly burst from the ground underneath them, surrounding the team completely. There were 3 kinds of creatures. All brand new to the teens. One of them looked like a giant centipede that towered over them, even with some of its body still underground. Parts of its body would rotate in a complete circle, suggesting a less than simple anatomy. There were some small creates that didn't look like any animal they'd ever seen before. The best one could describe it as if an alligator wore armor and instead of having 4 legs on the top and bottom parts of its body, just had 2 big legs in the middle, like a T-Rex without arms. And the last one was just a giant worm the size of a very small building, with a huge gaping spiked maw. All in all, there were 5 centipedes, 12 of the small creepy things, and 1 massive worm. Oh, they can go underground. Of course, they can. Shinso growled. Focus on the girl with the purple hair, Fu ordered. Huh? Jiro yelled in shock and horror. Why me? Rat. The creatures closed in and went to attack them. Jiro plugged her earlobes into her boots and blasted the Grim in her direction with a wave of sound. The creeps were blown back by the wave. The centipedes were stunned for a moment but didn't seem too affected. A centipede and 2 creeps charged at Jiro from behind, intent on attacking her. Shinso went forward and threw his capture tool around the 2 creeps, and slammed them into the centipede's moving blades where they were then eviscerated. Okako jumped at the centipede head, and touched it, using her new ability to increase gravity, to cause the beast to crash onto the ground. Meteor kick. Uraraka charged up to 7% of 1 for all and came down on the centipede with an axe kick to the skull, crashing through the bone and into the soft black parts. As the Grim faded away, 6 creeps ran at Jiro, 3 on both sides of her. Shoji charged in and knocked the 3 creeps away on her left, while Jiro blasted the 3 on her right with a sound wave. Why is he after me? Jiro shouted at Okako. as the whole team grouped up. I don't know. It doesn't make any wo. Suddenly Okako was grabbed by the leg by a large black tendril and dragged away from her teammates. This tendril came, not from the Grim, but from Fu himself, his arm being completely covered in the inky black substance. Fu brought Okako in front of him, holding upside down in front of his face. We haven't seen each other in a while, so allow me to induce Kyozai. Say hi. Suddenly the inky blackness overtook Fu's face and replaced it with a pure black one with white eyes and sharp teeth. Wah! Okako was thrown away from the rest of her team by Fu's tentacle. Fu's body was then covered by Kyozai until the boy underneath could no longer be seen, and then he charged after Okako, running on all fours like an animal. Just when I thought he was a normal-looking kid, Shinso remarked. Back in the observation room. So is that his quirk? Sero asked Izuku. No, the black inky stuff is actually another one of my kids, Izuku revealed. Wait, what? Shouted a good chunk of the class. That black goop is a ... kid? Kaminari's jaw was hanging. Yes, his name is Kyozai ... and please don't call him black goop. Izuku sighed. He didn't blame him for calling Kyozai that. It wasn't the most flattering thing to call a child, but it wasn't inaccurate. Kyozai's quirk is called symbiont. His body is composed entirely of this black liquidy substance, which allows him to enter into people's bodies and form a bond with them, turning them into a host. This host will gain numerous physical advantages such as enhanced strength, speed, durability, etc., as well as the ability to use Kyozai's body itself as a weapon. Nezu explained, looking at the amazed faces of his students. However, this comes at a cost. While bonded, Kyozai will begin to feed one's internal organs until the host has died. It will also cause the host's emotions to become overwhelming, to the point where the host no longer knows how to handle them, which in theory would often resolve in the host going insane until they die. The looks of amazement that had been on the students' faces when they heard of Kyozai's benefits turned to horror and shock when they heard of the price. Wait. Then why does that kid have him? Sato was the first to ask the question that was now on everyone's minds. Well, I assume this Fu has a quirk that would negate the drawbacks of bonding with Kyozai. Alright. Momo asked, hoping she was correct. Very astute of you. Young Fu's quirk makes him ... Well, immortal may not be the right word, it's rather complicated to explain, so let's just say it makes him an unkillable zombie, which is an oxymoron, but that is the best way to explain it, Nezu said. So long as he consumes enough meat, he will be able to regenerate from any and all injuries. He is unable to physically feel anything, and his emotions, while he still has them, are muted to a degree. So he's the perfect host, Tokoyami concluded. The class calmed down. For the most part, some of them were still a bit squeamish about the thought of someone's organs getting eaten. Why not just ... not give Kyozai a host? Mina asked. I doubt it would be that simple, Todoroki responded. He said that Kyozai feeds on the organs through the bonding process, implying that he needs to bond in order to survive. Very good, Mr. Todoroki. You are absolutely correct. Nezu happily praised his student. Without a host, Kyozai will die. Meaning that there was no other option than to find someone like Fu. There was a moment of silence as the class had to let that information sink in. Back with Team C-Okako, the three remaining members of the team did their best to hold off the attacking Grim, but without Okako there wasn't much damage they could do to them. The creeps weren't that bad to deal with, but the centipedes with their spinning blades were completely unapproachable by the students, and all they could do was avoid them. And then there was the worm. The worm was far too tough for them to hurt, and its ability to dive underground served to make fighting it an even more futile effort. Thankfully Shoji and Jiro were able to detect any underground attacks, but avoiding them proved to be easier said than done. This is pointless, Shinso said as he slammed a creep into a centipede's head using his capture tool. We can't beat these things without your Araka. We need to regroup with her. How though? Jiro asked as she ran away from a centipede. There's too many of them. And they're underground. Anytime we try to get away, that worm will just pop up and stop us. Shoji said as he gave a three-armed backhand to a creep. Well, if they're underground then we need to get into the air. Shinso looked up at the nearby buildings. We need to get to the rooftops. Great idea. How? Jiro asked. Shinso threw his capture tool around the waist of both his teammates. You have to push us up there with your quirk. Or at least far enough for me to get us up there. Jiro looked up at the closest building, and then back at her two teammates. If she could blast them up far enough into the air with her speakers, then Shinso could use his capture tool to swing them over to a rooftop, and hopefully out of the reach of the Grim. But that was a big if. At least my heart is pounding. Jiro thought. She didn't have much time though, as the Grim started encroaching on them once more. Jiro couched down, and faced her, speakers towards the floor. You know, if this doesn't work we're fucked, right? Well, if we stay here we're pretty fucked too, so less sass and more sound waves, Shinso told her. Jiro held her breath. Boom. She let off the biggest sound wave she'd ever let off, and it launched them into the air, with Shinso's capture tool keeping them together. And they made it. 2/3 of the way up. They made it 2/3 of the way up the side of the building. Fortunately, they had made it just far enough for Shinso to throw his capture tool around a railing on one of the rooftops. The three of them swung to the side of the building. And were now out of reach of the creeps and centipedes. Oh god, I can't believe that worked. Jiro released the breath she was holding, as she hung by Shinso's capture tool, along with her other two teammates. Looks like we're out of the danger zone for now, Shinso said. Jiro's eyes suddenly widened, as she heard something that gave her chills. I wouldn't say that. It's the worm. It's coming up and fast. It might be trying to jump. Shit. Shinso knew what he needed to do. He grabbed his capture tool and tried to climb up the side of the building. However, with both Shoji and Jiro weighing him down, he wasn't making much progress. Shoji saw this and reacted accordingly, grabbing both Shinso and Jiro and taking hold of the capture tool, and climbing up much faster. A few seconds later they had made it most of the way there. And then, the worm burst from the ground, leaping into the air. The three teens froze in terror as they saw its spiky maw getting closer and closer way too quickly. Fortunately, though, the worm stopped a few feet away from them, as gravity finally took effect and forced the worm back to the ground. The teens were flooded with an intense sense of relief, knowing they were finally out of danger. For now. Shoji pulled them to the rooftop, and Shinso unwrapped his capture tool off of them. Alright, now let's go find your Araka, Shinso said. Can you two locate her? They both nodded and Shoji made some extra ears, while Jiro started moving her ear jacks around. Meanwhile at the fake park, with Okuko. Crash. Your Araka was thrown through a tree by one of Fu's tendrils. She rolled across the dirt until she stopped when her body smashed into a rock. Ah. Okuko grunted in pain, as she slowly tried to pull herself off the ground. Fu dashed a few feet away from her, giving his opponent a menacing leer. Wow Fu, you really got a lot stronger since we fought last time. Okuko felt a strange feeling while fighting Fu and Kyozai. She'd kinda felt bad for him before. The boy was the only one in the group of kids that wanted to be heroes, that didn't have a super offensive quirk. Heck, technically speaking, his quirk wasn't good for defense either, since regeneration didn't defend you, rather it just kept you from dying. The poor boy would get tossed around and dismembered and beheaded and even used as a weapon by Kiba a few times. But with Kyozai, Fu was now a significant threat, and Okuko felt kinda proud. Even if he was kicking her ass? Thanks. We may not be as strong, Kiba, but we have a few tricks up our sleeve. Fu raised his arm, and it shape-shifted into a hammer. Sanson taught us this one. Fu raised his hammer arm up, stitching it high into the sky before bringing it down on Okako. Okako quickly dashed out of the way as the hammer slammed down onto where she had been standing, breaking the ground it smashed into. Uraraka changed that Fu, with one for all speeding her up. She didn't get too close, however, as 5 tentacles grew out of Fu's back and flew at Okako. Okako had to suddenly stop, and then move back as she jumped out of the way of various tentacle swipes. As one of the tentacles jabbed at her, she dodged it and grabbed onto the tentacle, intent on making Fu heavier. But, before she could get all 5 fingers on it, the tentacle shifted around in her hand, covering it and keeping all her fingers separated, so her quirk wouldn't activate. "Did you think we didn't think about how to deal with that?" Fu told her. Kyozai's black goo spread from Okako's hand onto her arm. Okako struggled to try and escape Kyozai's grip, but even using 7% of one for all didn't help her. More tentacles wrapped around Okako's body, trapping her in a cocoon of black. "This is my win, Uraraka." Fu raised Okako high in the air. "Uraraka." Fu paused and turned to look behind him, and saw Shinso, Shoji, and Jiro, running towards him. "So you escaped the Grim." Fu shot out more tendrils from his back at the 3 students. All 3 of them managed to jump out of the way but had to keep running as the tendrils kept chasing them. "How long are these things?" Shinso shouted as he kept running. "Why don't you use your quirk to stop him?" Jiro asked her fellow purple-haired classmate. "I tried. It didn't work," Shinso told her. "Right. Most of Fu's brain functions are dead. So Shinso's quirk doesn't work on him," Okako thought as she kept struggling inside of Fu's cocoon. And then, much to her surprise, she managed to move her hands around and touched the cocoon with her fingers. Huh? Suddenly all of Fu's tentacles smashed into the ground, as did his body, as gravity suddenly tripled on him. Okako's cocoon smashed into the ground and was reduced to goo by the impact, freeing her from its hold. What happened? Did he get distracted and lose focus? Okako speculated, while she quickly pulled herself out of the goop. Uraraka. Okako looked up and saw her team running towards her. "Guys." Uraraka met them halfway, finally reuniting with her teammates. "How'd you get away from all the Grim?" "We used the rooftops. All the Grim moved primarily underground so they couldn't follow us once we got up there," Shoji explained. "Nice." Okako praised, giving her team the thumbs up. But what so do now? Unlike the other 2, this one seemed to be leading the attack, so we may have to force him to surrender, without hurting him, Shoji theorized. "I think since this is an exercise, just threatening to hurt him would make him surrender, given that most children would give up under threat of harm." "That's not possible. Fu can't be harmed, or even feel pain. His quirk makes it impossible," Okako explained. "Well, it doesn't seem like he can do anything now that you've increased his gravity," Shinso noted. "I wouldn't be so sure." The 4 of them looked at Fu, who had retracted his tentacles into themselves, and pulled himself off the ground, using sheer strength to resist the increased gravity. "He's a lot stronger than he looks," Okako told them, as they got ready to defend themselves. And faster too, so be careful. Before she could finish what she was saying, Fu lunged at Jiro, tackling her to the ground. "Ah! Why are you going after me?" Jiro tried to pull Fu off her, but this was to no avail, as the increased gravity made Fu heavier and harder to pull off. Fu raised his fist to punch Jiro in the face, and that's when Jiro raised her earlobes in defense. Kyozai roared out in panic, and Fu jumped off of Jiro as quickly as he could and continued to back away from her. "Huh?" Jiro paused in confusion. "What just happened?" Shinso asked in equal befuddlement. He seemed frightened of Jiro's earlobes. Shoji pointed out. "Come to think of it, when he sent the Grim after us, he focused on Jiro, but if he can't be harmed, so what's he afraid of?" Shinso turned to Okako for answers. "I don't know." Izuku never mentioned a weakness to sound ... unless ... Fu isn't weak to sound, but Kyozai is. Okako realized. Fu lunged at Okako but the girl jumped back to dodge it. Can you guys pin him? Jiro asked her teammates. Your Araka, can't you increase his gravity more? It's tied to how much strength I'm using. And I'm already at my limit. Okako explained as Fu kept jumping and swiping at her. Shoji charged at Fu, tackling the boy and then wrapping him up in his arms as they rolled on the ground. In response, spikes grew from Fu's body and stabbed into Shoji. AGH. Shoji cried out in pain as he released his grip on the boy. Shinso threw out his capture to let Fu, but the boy just ducked out of the way. He's still too fast, Shinso said. If I could wrap him up then we might be able to win. Okako looked at Shinso's capture tool and then at Fu, and she got an idea. With enhanced speed, your Araka charged forward and two of the ends of Shinso's capture tool. She ran at Fu, and Fu lunged at her. Okako jumped over Fu and wrapped his body up in the tool. Fu tried to use his strength to get it off of him but found that his bindings were surprisingly durable. Okako ran around Fu, continuing to wrap him up in the capture tool until the boy was completely restrained. Ugh. Fu tried to use Kyozai's shape-shifting to make a tentacle or something to help him escape, but the moment the tentacle got more than a foot away from his body, it splattered against the ground due to the increased gravity. Jiro quickly ran over and pointed one of her speakers at Fu's face. Give up or so help me I will blast you. Fu stopped moving for a while, and after a few seconds, Kyozai retreated back inside of him. We surrender. Chapter 39. Queen of Eternal Darkness. Sorry, this took so long to get out. These UA chapters require a lot more effort than the normal chapters of this fic, and as such take longer to get out. And this chapter was really long. Although it's fitting that it's long, considering who makes an appearance in this chapter. Anyway, without further ado, on to the chapter. So ... I think I know where the kid is. Kirishima commented. Nezu had Team D wait a bit, so they could change the fake city a bit. Firstly they had shifted it into night mode, covering the city in a dome that gave off some fake moonlight. The only other light sources were the street lights that were littered about the city. However, the most notable change was the enormous castle that took the place of a few buildings. It looked to be made mostly of cement, meaning that Cementos was most likely used to make it so quickly. Still, it didn't make it very hard to figure out where the kid they were supposed to find was. Right, they are most likely inside the castle, Tokoyami said. Although given how our other classmates' trials have been, I have little doubt that it's a trap. I'll go ahead. Any surprise attacks I'll have to go through me. Kirishima hardened his arms and brought his fist together. No arguments there. Tari gave him a thumbs up, not that anyone could see it, as she was without her gloves. With that decided, Kirishima went out in front, with Tokoyami and Tari following behind and Ojiro guarding the rear. Back in the observation room. So a castle, Sero remarked, a little taken aback that they made a whole freaking castle just for this kid. Yeah she's a bit overdramatic. Izuku sighed, although there was a hint of a smile on his face. Oh. Is it Kiba? Is it finally time for Kiba? Mina asked very eagerly. Representing more than half of my readers. Well, yeah it's her. Izuku sheepishly admitted. Unlike the others, she was very involved in the process of making this exercise. Of course, we had to refuse a lot of her requests because a lot of them were unrealistic. But the exercise still has a lot of Kiba to it. Yeah. Mina cheered. They're not meeting much resistance. Todoroki pointed out as he watched his 4 classmates travel towards the castle. I expected more of those grim monsters. Maybe they'll be there when they try and enter the castle. Sato theorized. No. Izuku shook his head. Kiba has something different planned. I think it'd be better if you just watched. A few minutes later, with Team D as Team D, reached the entrance of the castle, they found Kiba waiting for them. Standing up on a balcony over the gate. Kiba was wearing a very elegant black dress, with long black gloves and black dress shoes, as well as a golden crown with large red rubies. And her hair was styled up in fancy drills. "Welcome, heroes," Kiba said in a very smug tone, her face reflecting her confidence as she literally looked down on the students. "To your demise. I am Kiba Midoriya, Queen of Eternal Darkness, the rightful ruler of all that lives and breathes, and the one destined to inherit the earth." This got various reactions. Tokoyami went silent, as he got bad middle school flashbacks. "Wow. This is a lot." Ojiro thought. "Is this part of the exercise? What's going on?" Kirishima wondered in confusion. Taru on the other hand. Taru squealed. "It's Kiba. Ah, I love her. Look at her. Look at how cute she is and her cute little dress." Everyone was taken aback by the invisible girl's sudden outburst. Most of all Kiba, mostly because she didn't know she was there. "So this is the streamer you were so excited about. Yeah, that makes sense," Ojiro said, taking a good look at Kiba. "This is the exact kind of person the internet would enjoy." "Well, she sure is cute," Kirishima admitted. "The cutest." Taru gushed. "Ahem." Kiba fake coughed into her fist to pull the attention back to her. "I see my reputation precedes me. To think even someone in the heroes party would admire me so. Well, we will touch back upon that later. For now, I must test you to see if you are worth my time. Now. Come. Unkillable." "What?" said all four of the students at once. Then, from inside the castle, they heard a clopping sound. Like a big horse was coming towards them, very quickly. "What kind of name is?" Before Ojiro could finish he was cut off. Rat. A blood-curdling, ear-piercing scream ripped through the air, forcing the students to clutch their heads in, coving their ear hoping to stop the noise from reaching them. Through the gates exited another huge grim. This one being far more horrifying than anything else they'd seen up until this point. Its bottom half was a huge grim horse, that looked rather normal for a grim, with the exception of its ribcage poking out of its chest, and its red eye glowing slightly brighter and more menacingly than the other grim. The particularly horrifying part was the rider, which was physically attached to the house by its torso. Its body was skinny, with its ribcage poking out in the same way as the horse, and jagged spiny bones came out of its spine. Its mouth didn't seem to be able to fully open, as the black parts of its lower mouth seemed to be stuck to the bony white part of its upper mouth as if its teeth had dug into its gums and were pulling it upwards, as its mouth emitted a strange hellish glow that could also be seen in its eyes. To make it even more demon-like was its mask featuring two long horns at the top of his head, and its long disproportionate, skinny arms, which went all the way down to the ground, and at the end of them, instead of hands, were two things that were somewhere between claws and fingers. In summary, it looked like the Horseman of Death had come and was physically attached to the horse. The four students stood absolutely still, paralyzed in shock and horror. Back in the observation room. "What the actual fuck?" Kaminari blurted out. "L language." Ida managed to pull himself together quick enough to scold his classmate, but his eyes were still glued to the screen. "Hey Midori, have you ever considered getting these kids to a therapist?" Mina asked Izuku, trying to look away from the screen as much as possible. "Constantly," Izuku admitted. "I'm honestly kinda ashamed of myself for not having them all on regular appointments. It's just hard to find people you trust with your kids." "Don't you have other employees you trust with your kids?" Todoroki asked. You see. Izuku was sweating a bit, looking away from the class as his face turned red. Momo's eyes went wide. "Wait a minute. Are you saying that you still haven't hired any other employees?" Okako gave Izuku a stern look, making him sweat even more. Wait, what? Jiro asked. Once again the class was treated to yet another shock, when they all suddenly realized that Izuku was taking care of all these terribly dangerous children, by himself. Suddenly a few of them, such as Todoroki, Shinso, and Momo, had noticed a few things about Izuku they didn't before. Such as the bags around his eyes, and his overly tired posture. As if he was running on nothing but coffee and determination. I mean, I've been looking at applicants. Izuku swiftly defended himself. It's just ... like I said, it's hard to find people to look after your kids. I've heard horror stories about babysitters or people running orphanages who abused and mistreated the children. And the kids ... have already been through so much. But if you keep this up, you're gonna work yourself into the ground. Okako scolded. How much did you even sleep last night? Oh well, you know ... Hey, while Izuku answered without answering, making Okako glare harder. Do you have some kind of quirk that helped with exhaustion? Mina asked him. This only made Izuku sweat even harder. See, can we not talk about shitty? Deku doesn't have a fucking quirk. Oh no, Izuku muttered. Into the observation room walked Katsuki Bakugo. Still in a few cast as recovery girl, was unable to heal all the broken bones Kai had given him. He was exhausted and his body still ached, but that didn't stop him from limping his way here, and glaring at Izuku like he took his entire existence as a personal insult. Which he did. Deku's quirkless. Bakugo barked. Which is why he's been hiding from me. For months. Most of the class gave Izuku surprised looks, receiving yet another shock in only a short while. Izuku, however, switched from nervous to exasperated. Kaken. I haven't been hiding from you, I just moved. Where? Bakugo shouted at him. Izuku sighed and shook his head. Kaken. We'll have this conversation later. Like hell, you get to tell me what to do. Bakugo limped towards him, but Okako stood in his way. Get the fuck out of the way, round face. Try and make me. Okako dared him in a deadly, serious tone. You won't get far in those casts. You look like you are about to tip over. Grrrr. Bakugo opened his mouth to let out some more curses and threats, but someone far more threatening spoke first. Katsuki Bakugo. Everyone froze when Nezu spoke up. His tone was as calm as ever, but there was an underlying threat lacing his words that sent shivers up Bakugo's spine. Need I remind you that you are on exceedingly thin ice? Acting so impolite to our guest is an offense worthy of detention at least. TCH. Bakugo held back his tongue. He was absolutely pissed, but he knew that saying literally anything right now wouldn't help him. Not with someone like Nezu. And I doubt Recovery Girl cleared you to leave the medical wing either. Meaning that not only did you threaten our guest, you disobeyed one of our staff to do so. Nezu deduced. And what's worse is that the guest you threatened is a high-ranking government associate. And the head of the government Q.R branch. Wait, what the fuck? Katsuki was taken off guard by that, looking at Izuku with a mix of anger and shock. Deku. What the fuck have you been up to? I will explain later. It apostrophe s. A long story, Izuku sighed. For now you should go back to Recovery Girl's office. I will tell you about it later. I promise. Bakugo wanted to shout at him. Tell him that he can't tell him what to do. But he could feel Nezu's gaze. Warning him that if he did anything funny, he'd pay for it dearly. Yes, I think that would be for the best. Nezu agreed. And I think it would be best if you did this, now. If looks could kill, Izuku would have died a long time ago, but right now, he would have been atomized. But that was all he could do. Give Izuku an enraged look, and eventually, turn away and leave towards Recovery Girl's office. After that, there was a prolonged period of silence, as the class took in this new information, while Izuku prepared himself for the worst. Quirkless huh. Man, that sucks. Kaminari said. Izuku was a bit shocked, but even more so when Jiro stabbed him with one of her jacks. Ah! What the hell was that for? Kaminari rubbed his arm where Jiro had stabbed him. For being an insensitive idiot. Jiro hissed at him. While I doubt you had any harmful intent, your words could be taken offensively, Kaminari, Shoji explained. It could be taken as you looking down on him. What? Oh shit, I'm so sorry man. Kaminari swiftly apologized. No it's fine. Izuku reassured him flustredly. You're right, it does suck ... a lot. More than you can imagine, Okako muttered bitterly. And that explains the trust issues. Shinso now saw Izuku in a whole new light. Quirk discrimination. I thought the whole thing with bakugo was the reason, but that was just a small part of something a lot worse, wasn't it? Is quirk discrimination really bad around here? Mina asked, with a very concerned and worried expression on her face. Wait, does that mean bakugo is quirkist? Sero asked. I mean, I don't know. Sato asked before looking at Izuku curiously. Is he? If he is, then it's appalling that you allowed him in despite this. Todoroki looked at Izuku. How bad? Did he treat you because you were quirkless? Or was there another reason? Izuku didn't quite know what to say, and he was looking increasingly uncomfortable, with all the attention pointed at him. Because of his quirklessness. Fortunately, this was very different from the past. Enough. Ida suddenly shouted, causing almost everyone to jump. That detail was obviously something Midoriya was trying to hide, and something that clearly makes him uncomfortable. He is an honored guest at UA and we should desist in asking about such things for the time being. We are mostly a bunch of strangers to him. I really don't know why you'd think he'd want to open up to us. Asui reminded everyone. Yeah, guys, come on, give him some space. Okako said, getting between Izuku and everyone else. Thank you. Izuku's face turned red. Embarrassed at needing to hide behind his friends from something that ultimately, in his opinion, he should have been able to handle. Right. I guess the last thing I'd want to do is talk about my discrimination issues with a bunch of people I met less than 2 hours ago. Shinso chided himself. The purple-haired teen now had a keen interest in whatever the hell Izuku's story was. Partially out of curiosity, and partially because he wanted to know how much he should hate bakugo. Putting Midoriya ''s ... condition? Is it okay to call it that? Momo wasn't really sure how to handle this situation, and she was very afraid of being labeled a quirkist or worse, subconsciously being a quirkist. It really doesn't matter, that's one of the nicer things people have called it anyway, Izuku explained. Well, not to sound dismissive, but putting that aside, would you like to explain the part where Nezu said you were in charge of the QR branch? Momo asked. It had taken a while for her to get over that particular fact. It just didn't make any sense to her. Not only should one person not be doing that much work, but he was 15. Since when could 15-year-olds be government agents, let alone run a branch of the government? Yeah, what's that about? Okako had, in her rage at bakugo, completely missed that part the first time and was now left wondering what her friend had gotten himself into now. That was not necessarily true. While I do hold ... influence over the QR branch, and I have power and responsibilities aligned with them, I am not technically in charge. Izuku explained. This was true. While the quirk removal branch would do basically anything he said, considering that he could put an end to the whole branch at any time, that was only in practice, as on paper the government was still and fully in charge of that branch. And that branch now had its own leaders and officials. This might be a stupid question, but what's the QR branch? Kaminari asked. I don't know what it is either. Sero admitted. Looking around, it was easy to tell that most of the class seemed to not know what it was either. Really? None of you have heard about it? Momo looked at her entire class in shock. I suppose the news has only started to spread recently, but I had expected at least a few of you to know. It stands for Quirk Removal Branch, Nezu explained. This time the entire class was in shock, and it showed. Wait? Quirk removals? Like getting rid of quirks? Sero's eyes were wide and his jaw was hanging, and this expression was shared by a large chunk of the class. Why yes, Izuku admitted, before quickly explaining himself. The QR branch is focused on removing quirks from level 2, OPCs. And only ones I think should have their quirks removed. But, how? Why? What even Momo really couldn't wrap her head around a single teenager being in charge of such an important function, that could change so many people's lives. How does one even erase a quirk? Todoroki asked. And what are the criteria for it? Shinso asked. Well, I can't tell you how it happens, but as for the criteria, typically, only people with quirks that are too dangerous to be allowed to exist in society. Izuku tried to think of the best example. For example, there was a boy who had a roulette quirk. Every 24 hours his quirk would change from one thing to the next. This caused a lot of different problems, as no one could adapt to his quirks since it kept changing. Most of the time this would only lead to minor injuries and small-scale property damage. However, some of his quirks were so dangerous that they would lead to mass death and destruction. And so eventually DOC had to take him in and contain him. And since there was nothing they could do to contain his quirk, the only options he had would either be to stay locked up forever, or have his quirk be removed. Todoroki summarized. That sucks. Mino cried. Being locked away because you were born with a dangerous quirk. How horrible. Momo said. Izuku. Okako, unlike the others, was more concerned for her friend. After all, she knew having to decide the fates of people's lives must weigh heavily on him. Unfortunately there is little choice for anyone in the matter, Nezu spoke up. If the people with these quirks were to be released, then they would cause casualties eventually. Whether they wanted to or not. Their quirks are simply too uncontrollable. And so these are the only two real options. It is truly horrible for these people and their families, but there is little choice otherwise. The class went silent, a feeling of frustration brewing inside most of them. Frustration at the misfortune of these innocent people, who they could do nothing to help. Of course removing quirks is only a last resort, Izuku reassured them. DOC will try first and foremost to find ways for these children to live with their quirks, rather than simply just taking them away. At least they will, so long as I'm deciding who gets their quirks erased. I imagine that the government has been trying to expand the scope of this branch? Nezu asked him. Yeah, but taking away someone's quirk is a serious matter. One that shouldn't be treated as a first or even second option. Izuku explained. It's condemning them to a life of hardships. The class once again went silent, as they had to fully take in what Izuku had said. Well, I believe that's enough sidetracking. It looks like the battle with that monster is about to end. Nezu said, turning everyone's attention back to the exercise. A few minutes ago, with Team D. The monster, because I'm not gonna write out its name every time, let out another ear-piercing scream, as it charged towards them. Ugh! Dark Shadow. Tokoyami covered his ears and called out for Dark Shadow to attack. The sentient quirk, which had been suppressed since the exercise started, burst out of his cloak to confront the charging Grim. Dark Shadow was quite big due to the lack of light, about the size of the creature's torso, and so when the two met, Dark Shadow was able to tackle the monster's chest. But while this did stun the rider a bit, it didn't manage to stop the horse from charging towards them. I got this. Kirishima activated his quirk, hardening his arms and running towards the monster. Kirishima grabbed the horse's legs mid-charge and tried to hold it back, but whenever the horse would pick up its feet it was taking Kirishima with it. Whoa. 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 The horse did stop its charge, but only so that way it could flail around, to try and throw Kirishima off its leg. Meanwhile, Dark Shadow was busy attacking the monster's head, clawing at its head and making some scratches in its mask. The Knuckle AV grabbed into Dark Shadow's face and then started pushing it away, however much To everyone's surprise, its arms extended, pushing Dark Shadow a couple dozen feet in the air, before rotating its body and swinging Dark Shadow around, and then slammed it into the ground. "Everyone close your eyes," Taru shouted. Knowing what was coming, everyone closed their eyes. "Say cheese." Taru unleashed a massive flash of light that blinded the horse and the rider. The creature stumbled back, the rider covered its eyes with its hands while the horse just started barking around while blinded. Ojiro took this time to jump up to the horse's head, using his tail to boost himself up before hitting the head with his tail. This didn't do much damage, but it did further stun the horse, causing it to stumble. "Dark Shadow. Its legs," Tokoyami commanded. Dark Shadow rose up and charged at its legs, tripping it up and causing the horse to fall. "Now, for its head." Tokoyami allowed Dark Shadow to grow a bit larger, and the sentient quirk went right towards the rider's head. The monster stretched one of its arms at Dark Shadow to protect itself, but then, Ojiro jumped up and smacked the arm away. It was about to use its other arm to try again, but Kirishima held it back. "Not today." Dark Shadow reached its head, opened its massive beak, and bit its head off. At that moment, the creature stopped moving and slumped over. A few seconds later, it started to evaporate, and eventually, it turned into nothing but black smoke. Tokoyami watched as the monster disappeared and forced Dark Shadow back to his side, repressing his emotions enough to shrink him. "Yeah. All right." Taru cheered, throwing up her hands in celebration, not that anyone could see it. "I thought that would be a lot harder." "It probably would have been if it wasn't for Dark Shadow," Ojiro pointed out, taking a moment to breathe. "Yeah, that was awesome, man." Kirishima praised his classmate. "You two are manly as hell." HMPH. "A simple matter. You all also performed well," Tokoyami said simply. "Now, let us confront the child." "Hey Hagakure, you said you've watched this kid on YouTube, right?" Kirishima asked, looking around since he couldn't see her. "That's right." Taru had a huge smile on her face, not that anyone could see it. "She is so cute the way she acts like a little queen. And when she messes up or makes a mistake, how she stutters and tries to fix it, it's just so cute." "Alright. But what about her quirk?" Ojiro asked. "Oh, it's some kind of enhancement quirk," Taru revealed. "She's super strong and fast and tough. And she keeps calling herself a vampire, so she probably has to drink blood. Maybe it's like Sato's quirk but with blood instead of sugar," Kirishima speculated. "In that case, it would be best if Kirishima once again took the lead," Tokoyami told them. "Sure. More than happy to take a hit for my friends." Kirishima gave him the thumbs up. "'Cause that's how a real man does it." With that decided, they all stomped the castle. When they got inside, they found the castle was rather plain, lacking any color or decorations. Which was to be expected given how quickly it was made. It was also very narrow and small. The hallway they were running through didn't lead anywhere but in front of them, and it didn't seem like there were any other rooms either. The truth was the castle was mostly just cement with a hallway and throne room with no other rooms. When they finally reached the throne room, they were greeted with the sight of Kiba, sitting on a cement throne. It seemed that while they had been fighting the Grim, Kiba had gone for a change of clothes. Now she was wearing what looked like blood red armor, as well as her usual cloak. She was also holding a wine glass, with some blood in it. "Oh my god, look at her little armor!" Taru squealed. "Who made that?" Kirishima wondered. "Heroes." Kiba addressed them, while not looking away from her wine glass. "I see you have defeated my Unkillable. There has got to be a better name for that," Ojiro muttered. Kiba stood up, off her throne, and turned away from them. "Do you truly understand why I must rule this world? Are we supposed to answer that?" Or Kirishima couldn't get out any more words as an invisible hand covered his mouth. "SHHH. She's gonna start monologuing," Taru whispered. "You privileged few. born with abilities that fit the taste of the public, would never understand the struggles of my brothers and sisters. Kiba continued, little did they know the reason she had turned away was because she had written a script, and was currently reading from it. When my father found me, I was cast aside, thrown into the gutter by the despicable people that had been given the honor of birthing me. Despite my beauty, despite my grace, despite my power, despite my perfection, in their eyes, my quirk made me nothing but a parasite. A blood-sucking leech is what they called me. Is this real? Is this an act? What is happening? Ojiro was not prepared for a full monologue when he went to heroics class today. This is going to go on for quite some time, isn't it? Tokoyami cringed. He knew better than anyone that these kinds of speeches were not short ... because there was a time when he once gave them. For someone such as myself to be treated like gutter trash proves that this is wrong. That it is unjust. Kiba's acting was hammy, as usual, but it was what one would expect from a child. And her exaggerated hand motions made it all the more entertaining. And so I who am perfect? I whose power sits above all things. I whose gaze looks down upon all. I Kiba shall be the one to correct these imperfections. Back in the observation room. Wow, she is ... really going on for a while. Kaminari pointed out, while Kiba was still talking. She has some impressive grammar for her age. Momo praised the young girl. Well, she did read an entire dictionary, Izuku explained. Why? Kaminari asked, his face showing pure confusion. I haven't read through a dictionary. We could tell, Jiro smirked. How long does she intend to keep talking? Shinso asked. Well, the script she wrote was 20 pages, so this might take a bit. Izuku sighed. She wrote the script. Okako had an amused smile on her face, as she had to try and keep herself from laughing. What am I saying? Of course she had a script. She worked on it for hours. Izuku remembered seeing his daughter furiously writing and editing her work, with several dictionaries and thesaurus littered around her. She had worked so hard on it that he didn't have the heart to tell her to make it shorter. Although he did feel bad for having to put everyone through 20 pages of monologuing. At least the invisible girl seemed to be enjoying it ... not that he could really tell. She is still going. Todoroki honestly was surprised she hadn't run out of breath. How long has this been going on? Roughly 7 minutes, Nezu said. Well ... at least she's giving them time to recover after the fight with that monster, Momo said, trying to look on the positive side. She honestly did find the girl quite cute and she could see where her popularity came from. Heck, she'd probably check out one of her videos after this was all over. I don't get why you guys are complaining. Look at her. Look at that smug little face. Mina giggled. That's gonna stop being cute when she grows up, Shinso said. No ... no, she's still gonna be cute in the future, Mineta said. I can tell ... I am going to assume that was a compliment. And nothing else. Izuku said, his tone alerting the boy that this was a warning. Yeah. Of course. Mineta was quick to say, sweating a bit. The last person he wanted to piss off was the person in charge of deciding who got their quirks removed. Well, I doubt she could go on for much longer, Shoji said, with Team D ... 15 minutes later. And so that is why I ask you. Will you join me? Or be destroyed? Kiba finally finished her monologue, and dramatically pointed towards the students. Yes, my queen. Taru replied. No, she won't, Tokoyami said. Kiba looked at the other two ... only to find that they had fallen asleep. Hey? Huh? Kirishima and Ojiro jolted awake. Did you two fall asleep? Kiba was livid. I spent hours preparing that speech. And you two fell asleep? Sorry? Kirishima quickly apologized. You ... went on for a while, so ... you have 5 seconds to harden yourself before I turn you into a red smear on the walls, floor, and your friends, Kiba said in a dead serious voice, as she dramatically threw off her cloak. Hey wait, Kirishima didn't get any more words out before Kiba dashed over to him, at speeds he couldn't react to, and punched in his hardened stomach. Kirishima was immediately sent flying through the concrete walls, far away from his friends. Everyone took a step back, not expecting such speed and power from someone of her size. Even Taru hadn't expected that. Kiba gave Ojiro a nasty glare. You're next. Oh shit, Ojiro never saw himself being so afraid of a 7-year-old ... But after seeing one of his toughest classmates being knocked away like a baseball, he was more than a bit intimidated. Tokoyami unleashed Dark Shadow, who was doubled in size, and let him stand guard in front of Ojiro. Kiba was not deterred in the least however, and simply ran up to Dark Shadow, and uppercut him in the beak, sending him flying through the roof. Tokoyami could feel Dark Shadow's cord tugging at him, and he was almost lifted off the ground because of how high Dark Shadow was sent. I'm sorry my lady. Please forgive me. Taru unleashed another flash of light. Kiba hissed and covered her eyes. The sun. Run. Tokoyami commanded after Dark Shadow returned to him. The three immediately turned tail and ran for the exit while Kiba still recovered from Taru's attack. When they reached the hall, Dark Shadow took a moment to cave in part of the roof, blocking off access to the throne room. That won't hold her long. She's strong. Really strong. Dark Shadow warned them, as he caved in more of the roof to try and block Kiba's path. And fast. She was so fast. Taru always wanted to meet Kiba, and when she realized that she was gonna be the one to face her, she was excited. And now she was remembering that Kiba was gonna be the one kicking her ass. So now she was a little less excited, a little more scared out of her mind. They felt the castle shake, and the sound of something being destroyed behind them signified that Kiba had recovered, and was breaking through their barriers. And so they ran, just a bit faster. When they reached the outside, they found Kirishima, whose lower half was still stuck in the side of the wall. Kirishima. Taru ran over to her classmate, who looked to be in a daze. Huh? Taru? Why are there 5 of you? Kirishima asked deliriously. Dark Shadow pulled Kirishima out of the wall and set him down gently. They could see the imprint of Kiba's fist on his hardened abs, as well as various cracks around it. Ojiro wanted to ask if his classmate was alright, but he was a bit distracted by the hole in the wall, showing that Kiba had punched him through many feet of concrete. Ah. Man, she punches hard. Kirishima groaned after regaining his senses. Throom. Well, unless we wanna be punched next, we gotta figure something out. Taru pointed out. Do you think there might be some kind of win conditions, like the other ones? Kirishima asked. I don't think so. The win conditions were pretty obvious. I think we just need to subdue her. Ojiro looked at the hole once more, realizing what he just said would entail. So we have to subdue a girl that can punch someone through a dozen feet of concrete and moves faster than we can see, while also not attacking her? Taru summarized. No one could see her expression, but they could tell she was probably terrified by the tone of her voice. That seems to be our only option. Tokoyami agreed, a nervous sweat going down his beak. Throom. The rubble over the exit was broken, and out came a very cross Kiba. You know, I had expected many things from the mighty warriors of U.A. Running away was not one of them. Kiba growled at them, burying her fangs in a way that would have been cute if she didn't just punch through a concrete barrier. Dark Shadow restrained her. Tokoyami let Dark Shadow grow to the biggest size he could get, which still allowed Tokoyami to control him. Dark Shadow charged at Kiba and tried to grab her, but despite being more than quadruple her size, Kiba just backhanded it away. However, Dark Shadow only was knocked a few feet away and quickly shook off the blow before charging at her again. TCH. Persistent little shadow. Kiba dashed towards Dark Shadow and proceeded to drop-kick the blackbird. Be gone. This time Dark Shadow got sent significantly further, being sent over a dozen feet away before digging his claws into the ground to stop himself. However, with Dark Shadow so far away, Kiba had a free shot at the students. Perhaps if the shadow will not yield, then I should destroy the one who casts it. Kiba glared at Tokoyami, with murderous intent. You'll have to get through me first. Kirishima stood in front of Tokoyami and activated his quirk, hardening his chest and arms. Kiba immediately ran over to him, grabbed his leg with both hands, before picking him up and swinging him like a mace, batting Tokoyami away. Hey! Wait a minute. Kirishima struggled, but Kiba had a death grip on his leg, and he couldn't do much without accidentally hitting Kiba. Not that it would have helped if he could. Dark Shadow came back and tried to get Kirishima away from her, but she just hit him with Kirishima too, landing repeated hits with her hardening weapon, keeping the shadow at bay. Grrrr. Harden your head. Kiba ordered her hostage weapon. Eh? Kirishima didn't have time to ask questions, as Kiba suddenly jumped up, and when she came back down he saw what she was going to do, and had no choice but to oblige. Kiba slammed Kirishima's face down on Dark Shadow's head as hard as she could. Dark Shadow was smashed into the ground, its head getting stuck for a moment. Kirishima was seeing stars, and he now finally understood what it was like to become an Ari after using his quirk. Taru. We could use another flash. Ojiro shouted out to his invisible teammate. KK. Sega. Before Taru could attack, Kiba threw Kirishima at her, hitting her in the torso and causing both her and Kirishima to go flying away through a nearby tree and out of sight. I will not allow her vile light to shine once more. Kiba shouted. Meanwhile, Dark Shadow pulled itself out of the ground and came at Kiba from behind, finally grabbing her with both arms and holding her in the air. Cursed Shadow! You will fade into the darkness. Kiba shouted as she struggled to try and get out of Dark Shadow's embrace. Dark Shadow was having a hard time keeping hold of her, as she was still stronger than him. He needed more power. And then he had an idea. You know, you remind me a lot of Fumikage when he was little. Dark Shadow told her. Dark Shadow. Cease. Tokoyami ordered, a small blush of embarrassment adorning his face. He used to wear a cape and some gold plastic armor. Dark Shadow continued. Dark Shadow. Tokoyami could feel his embarrassment grow. And he called himself, the Black Guardian of the Shadow Plains. Dark Shadow was cracking up as he recalled those memories. Ojiro gave his now thoroughly embarrassed classmate a look. Black Guardian ... of the Shadow Plains ... I think just the Black Guardian would have worked. Enough. Tokoyami shouted in pure outrage. Dark Shadow could feel it. The pain, the embarrassment, the sheer feeling of regret. All that combined with the stress of the exercise, and Tokoyami's already loosening control of him, made Dark Shadow get bigger and bigger. And then his eyes turned red. Oh no. Tokoyami realized too late what had happened, and all he could do was look on in horror as his quirk went out of control. Roar! Dark Shadow now towered over everyone, with Kiba still in his hands. He raised his arms up, and slammed Kiba into the ground. The ground cracked from the impact, and Kiba was left flat on her back, staring up at the monster that loomed over her. No! Ojiro and Tokoyami shouted, thinking they had failed the exercise. Kiba pulled herself up, rubbing the dust off her armor. Then she dashed away to avoid a slam from the enraged Dark Shadow. Kiba looked up at the pure black monster in front of her and smirked. Finally, a worthy opponent. Our battle will be legendary. Rat. Dark Shadow unleashed another attack, bringing his claw down on Kiba. In response, when the fist was in range, Kiba unleashed her own attack, punching the claw. When the two attacks collided, it sent waves of wind washing over the surrounding area, which made Ojiro and Tokoyami cover their eyes as the sheer force of it almost knocked them over. Dark Shadow and Kiba struggled in a test of strength. However, Kiba was surprised to find that she was actually being pushed back. She dug her feet into the pavement. However, This did very little to help as she was still getting pushed. Gah! Kiba grit her teeth as she felt the sheer power of Dark Shadow coming down on her arm. The pain coursing through her body grew greater as she grew weaker and weaker. The more she used her strength, the more she used it up. Am I being overpowered? No. I just need more blood. Kiba jumped back, away from Dark Shadow, and quickly set her sights on Ojiro. He'll do. Kiba lunged at Ojiro, with her teeth bared, and tackled the tailed student to the ground. Ojiro could do nothing but look on in terror, as Kiba's fangs came closer to his neck. And then a flash of light washed over everyone. Kiba hissed as she covered her eyes. Not again. Dark Shadow also covered itself, moving away from the light, and losing a few centimeters of size. While Kiba was stunned, Kirishima ran up and grabbed her with his hardened arm and chest. Are you guys okay? Taru ran up to Ojiro and helped him off the ground. Yeah. But we hit her. Ojiro pointed out. But it doesn't seem like the exercise has ended, Tokoyami noted. Perhaps the order not to harm her was yet another logical ruse. Congratulations, you figured it out. Kiba confirmed, before kicking Kirishima in the abs with the back of her foot. Now perish. AGH. Kirishima dropped Kiba as he recoiled in pain. A small crack appeared in his hardening. Dark Shadow charged at them, coming right at Kiba and Kirishima. Ojiro pushed Kirishima out of the way by hitting him with his tail, before moving out of the way himself. Kiba rushed at the oncoming Dark Shadow and jumped up to punch the sentient Quirk in the face. Dark Shadow recoiled from the impact of the punch, but quickly shook it off and retaliated with a swipe of his claw. AHH. This time Kiba was the one sent flying back, her body digging into the ground, and the force of the blow pushed her back over a dozen feet. Meanwhile, in the observation room. I don't understand? Ida shouted out to the principal. They are currently harming the child. The exercise should have ended. Well, you see, it was a logical ruse. Nezu cackled when he saw the shocked looks on the students' faces. You should be familiar with them by now. Wait? So we were allowed to harm the children? Momo couldn't believe what she was hearing. Surely such a thing couldn't be allowed at a hero school. You can't be serious. Mina added. Actually that makes sense, Okako said after thinking about it for a moment. Everyone but Nezu and Izuku gave her questioning looks, urging her to explain herself. These kids aren't fragile. It's not like we could do serious damage to them by accident with our quirks. Even Bakugo couldn't do serious damage to Kai by accident. I know. I fought them. Okako remembered that time she fought Fu, Kiba, Kei, and Sanson all at once. She shuddered at the memory. Never again. At first I thought I'd have to go easy on them but that didn't end well for me. Let us have this discussion once everyone is present, Nezu instructed them. But rest assured that Mr. Midoriya would not have allowed this if he believed you all could hurt his children any more than they hurt each other on a daily basis. Izuku nodded. These kids all want to become heroes, so they spar with each other on an almost daily basis. There are some times when I have to step in to keep them from doing serious damage to each other. I know what they're capable of, and I believe they can handle this and if not, they can always surrender. On the screen, they watched as Dark Shadow beat Kiba, as the vampire girl tried in vain to fight back. After a few minutes, it was clear to see that the fight was over. I think it's time we brought this to a close, Nezu said, looking over his control panel. Back with Team D suddenly, the dome that was being used to simulate nighttime, started to open up, allowing sunlight to fill the false city. Dark Shadow stopped beating Kiba into a crater and started roaring out in outrage. As more and more light flooded into the city, Dark Shadow grew smaller and smaller, until his red eyes turned yellow, and he was back to normal. Is it over? Kirishima asked no one in particular. That is correct, Mr. Kirishima. Team D has succeeded. Nezu said over the loudspeaker. What? Kiba, who was still conscious just a little scuffed up, pulled herself out of the hole dark shadow had pounded her in and looked absolutely outraged. I can still fight. Kiba had pulled herself to her feet too fast, and the stinging pain that coursed through her sent her right back down to her knees. Kiba. That's enough. Izuku said over the loudspeaker, his voice firm and leaving no room for argument. Kiba pouted but made no further protest. A few minutes later in the observation room. After a quick trip to Recovery Girl for Kirishima and Taru, everyone was back in the observation room. Now, as you have noticed, the rule in which you were not allowed to harm the children was a lie, Nezu explained with complete nonchalance while sipping his tea. You might be wondering why this is, and why, if this is the case, did I lie about it in the first place? Yes. I must admit I am very disappointed with the amount of deceit being done by our educators. Ida huffed. But there is a reason for that lie. An important one. However, first, let me explain why you are allowed to attack the children at all. Nezu said. Firstly, as you've all determined, these children are quite strong. That's a massive understatement? Thought pretty much everyone in the class. To be perfectly honest, harming these children is not something you could easily accomplish, and two of these children most of you have no way of harming at all. Nezu continued. It would take both a conscious effort on your parts and a lot of neglect on our parts, for one of these children to get seriously injured. I don't believe even Mr. Bakugo would seriously injure a child, nor does he have the power to do so accidentally. Yeah, but is it really okay to hit kids? Jiro asked sheepishly. A lot of the class still seemed unsure about the prospect of attacking children. Which was understandable. Surprisingly enough, it was Izuku that spoke next. While I definitely don't condone attacking children in almost any situation. There are unfortunate situations where that is the best course of action, Izuku said with a heavy heart. I don't like to think about it this way, but let's look at Kai's scenario. In that scenario, a villain forced Kai to go on a rampage. However, that test was simplified for the sake of this exercise. If the villain that controlled Kai was smart, he wouldn't be on top of a roof with the hostage right next to him. In all likelihood, it would take much longer to find them. And in that time, if the heroes didn't take him down, Kai would have destroyed the entire city, and killed countless people. The reality of the situation hit the class hard. They had been fighting in a fake city, with fake buildings and no other people. If this were real, then there would have been real people on those streets that Kai walked on and in those buildings he crushed. Those would have been real people's homes that got destroyed because of him. And the aftermath wouldn't be much better, Izuku continued. Of course there are the thousands or tens of thousands of lives he would have either ended or ruined, but even Kai's life would have taken a bad turn. Even if he got his parents back, the guilt he'd feel for what he did would leave mental scars that would last for the rest of his life. And he'd never be able to show his face anywhere again. He'd be treated like a monster by pretty much everyone, even if they knew his family was being taken hostage. His life would have been over before it really began. There was an underlying sadness in Izuku's voice. As if he wasn't just talking about the simulation. As if he had known stories similar to this, that wasn't fake. And that made everything he said all the more mortifying. And that leads into why I lied. Nezu jumped back in, although his tone was less cheery than before. Because what I said, don't attack the children, is what you will hear from the people in charge. Such as the Hero Public Safety Committee. However, while I do not condone frequently ignoring people with authority or your superiors, most of the people telling you this are not pro-heroes. They're not on the field. And they don't know what it's like to be in your situation, and as such sometimes fulfilling those orders is either impossible or not worth the cost. Is it ideal to not attack children? Yes, absolutely. Is it always possible? Unfortunately, no. And in those situations, you will have to go against what you've been told. These are the hard decisions one will have to make as a pro hero. This was the difference between Aizawa and Nezu. Aizawa would crush his students' spirits with harsh words, intimidation tactics, and threatening expulsions. Nezu was far more cruel. He would crush their spirits with the three worst enemies of man: truth, logic, and reality. To say the mood was low would be the understatement of the century. The mood went straight to hell. And it was clear everyone was deep in thought, taking Nezu's words very seriously. I'll have to hurt kids. That's awful. But if I I might just ruin their life. Mina thought about the scenario of having to choose between spraying a child with acid or condemning them for life. It made her stomach turn. Shinso thought about his own life. He had been targeted because people were afraid that he could use his quirk on them. There would be no telling how bad it would have been had he actually done something to someone with it. Let alone if he had done something as terrible as murder. Even if it was an accident or if he was forced, he would never hear the end of it. Okako felt like she had just increased her own gravity, or that she just overused her quirk. Part of her had wondered if one day she would be the one to give Izuku a child, not in that way she swears, but she's always thought it would be like how Izuku did it. Finding children in need and giving them a home. Not beating them to a pulp and delivering their unconscious body to Izuku. And the worst part is that look in his eyes when he explained it to them. That look of resignation and despair. He'd understood this for a while, and unlike her, he would be the one to deal with the aftermaths. After giving them a few minutes to take that in, Nezu decided it was time to move on. And as heroes, even when you have to make these decisions, you can't freeze before or after. Every second can count. Nezu warned them. And as such, let us move on to our last exercise. Okay, first off, let's say that I don't condone violence against children at all in real life. This is a fictional world with different rules, and as such there are situations that would not occur in real life. With that out the way, only 2 more U.A chapters to go. And I think most of you can guess who the next kid is. Chapter 40. April Acid. Hey guys. So, I wanted to upload this on April Fool's, but I was a day late. Sorry. Don't worry, it's a real chapter, but there is an April Fool's joke inside of it. Anyway, on to the chapter. The last team. Team E, consisting of Ida, Kaminari, Mina and Sero. We're now in the fake city, starting the last exercise. None of them were in good spirits, however. Not even Mina. Not because they would be facing another grossly overpowered child, but because of the conversation that had taken place not too long ago. So are we gonna hit the kids? Sero asked. I mean we might have to. Kaminari said sheepishly, seeming unsure of himself. Well, I don't want to. Mina objected. Overpowered or not, they're still kids. And all we have to do is show them some affection. We're no strangers to love, so we should show them some too. As much as I would like for that to be the case, I doubt Principal Nezu would allow for this to be so simple. Ida spoke up in a determined yet still, somehow unsure voice. You know the rules and so do I. The principal might have made this test knowing that and planned it out accordingly. So you think we might have to hurt them? Sero scratches his head. That's messed up. Don't think that I'll give up that easily. I'm never gonna give up. I'm gonna find that kid and hug the crap out of them. Mina said with full determination. And, with that Mina ran off, to find the kid. Wait. You have to wait for us. You have no idea what's up ahead. Ida ran after her, with the rest of the team following. Back in the observation room. The mood was still somewhat downtrodden, however, it seems most of the class had moved on, hoping that if they paid attention to the last exercise it would lift the mood up a bit. I've never seen Mina so down before. Kirishima thought as he remembered how upset she looked. Mina always had this attitude about her. Always this optimistic person, that would do her best to make sure she was never gonna let you down. But now she herself seemed down. He wished he could do something about it. He never wanted to see his friend like this, but honestly, he didn't know what to do here. It seems Mrs. Ito is quite determined. How fortunate for her that this mission will not require them to attack the child. Nezu saw his students take a sigh of relief. Because they can't. Wait, what? Taru asked. What do you mean they can't attack them? Oh, I think I know who it is. It's Sanson, isn't it? Asui realized the child's identity, remembering them from the amusement park. Izuku nodded, confirming her suspicions. Okako shuddered. Oh no. Oh no? Momo repeated in confusion. Is this child somehow more dangerous than the ones we've seen before? Sanson is considered the strongest of all the kids currently under my care, Izuku revealed, causing everyone to suddenly get nervous as they wondered what on earth could be that strong. Her quirk is called Acid Body. Her body is entirely made up out of extremely corrosive acid, and she can manipulate it however she pleases. Basically, she's completely immune to most attacks. Your quirk has to have some sort of special effect on her in order to take her down. Okako explained. Like my gravity manipulation. But I don't think anyone on Team E can do anything to her. Kaminari actually can do something. Electricity can cause Sanson to lose control over her body temporarily, turning her into a motionless pile of acid for about 20 seconds. Izuku remembered the day they found that out. Sanson got a bit too close to an electrical outlet, and it did not end well. Wait, so she's just a sentient blob of acid? Momo knew she was just repeating what Izuku had said. But it sounded absurd. Like many other things she heard today. She would be able to beat most people in this class just because of her quirk alone. She's like Mina on Trigger. Mineta shouted. Or a better version of that sludge villain. Tara pointed out. Izuku flinched but didn't say anything. So what are they gonna do? Sato asked. Well, it appears their current plan is to just run around and look for the child. Nezu pointed out. But it appears they won't have to look for much longer. Back with Team E was still running, and both Sero and Kaminari were falling behind. Mina. You must slow down. It is imperative that you do not desert your allies. Ida shouted at her. Mina stopped for a minute and used this opportunity to catch her breath. Sorry, you guys. I guess I got too ahead of myself. Oh wow. No wonder you guys couldn't keep up. I've never run that hard before. If you don't pace yourself, you gonna tire us all out before we even find the kid. Sero panted. Sis, everyone suddenly froze when they heard what sounded like acid burning through something. Mina, did you make any acid? Kaminari asked, looking around to see where that hissing was coming from. Nah, you guys would have seen me do it. Mina pointed out, wondering where the sound was coming from herself. Hiss. The four of them looked at a nearby manhole and found that smoke was coming off of it. And then, Sanson slowly oozed out of the hole, completely swallowing and destroying the manhole as she made her way onto the street, which also started smoking as she touched it. Is that the kid? Kaminari asked, slightly confused by the sight of the moving pink puddle of acid. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised, Sero said, resignation dripping from his word. Waraha. Sanson let out some strange noises which only confused the students more. Was that a cry? Are they crying? Mina honestly wished she had more details. I've never heard a cry like that before, Sero muttered. Or. Suddenly, in the distance, they saw two grim, this time looking like huge gorillas, charging right at them. We're gonna have to fight those things, aren't we? Kaminari asked nervously. It appears so. Ida got into a stance, ready to fight. However, Sanson suddenly moved towards them and went right at Ida. Huh? Ida quickly reacted, using his quirk to help him dodge Sanson's lunge. Squirt. Hug. Sanson said, reading the lines she had been giving earlier. Oh. I get it. She wants a hug. Kaminari said, however, His eyes widened in fear when he saw Sanson coming to give him a hug. Hey, wait a minute. Kaminari had to keep backing up as Sanson came closer and closer to him until eventually he just started running from the acid girl. Eventually, Sanson stopped chasing him and started going after Mina. Mina didn't quite know what to say, and just opened her arms up for a hug. Sanson didn't waste any time, and jumped on Mina, wrapping herself around the older acid girl and restraining her whole body. Hey. I like tight hugs but I can't move. Mina's whole body was being constricted by the goo girl. It was a good thing she was acid-proof. Unfortunately, it wouldn't hold out forever. Continuous exposure to acid would degrade her skin's resistance to it until she too would burn at Sanson's touch. The three guys couldn't do anything but watch, as Mina tried to struggle out of Sanson's grip to no effect. It's not like they could pull her off, she was made of acid. But they had other problems to worry about anyway, as the Gorilla Grimm were getting close. Mina, please try and calm them down, we will deal with these Grimm. Ida told her. Hopefully it will assist in calming them. Oh okay. Mina said she had stopped struggling at this point, seeing as it wasn't helping her in the slightest. With that decided, Ida, Sero, and Kaminari looked towards the oncoming threats. Kaminari, you said your quirk causes you to fry your brain, correct? Ida asked his classmate. Yeah. Kinda only, a one-use thing for now. Kaminari admitted. Then let me and Sero incapacitate these monsters. Ida strategized. Hey now wait a minute, Sero wasn't quite on board with fighting two giant hulking beasts with one less teammate after already being one teammate down. But he didn't have time to object as the gorillas were in range, and Ida ran at them. Aim for their feet, Sero. Ida ran at them as fast as he could while in first gear and charged right at one of the gorillas. One of the gorillas tried to pick Ida up but the armored student ducked under the swipe and went between its legs. The two gorillas had their attention on Ida, so they didn't notice Sero shoot out his tape at the left one's legs, tying them together and causing it to fall to the ground. The other one looked at Sero, giving it an enraged roar. However, before it could move to attack, Ida came back and kicked it in the back of the head, causing it to face plant onto the ground. Now, Kaminari, Ida ordered. Right. Sero, give me a boost. Kaminari told his ally. Sero nodded and wrapped Kaminari's midsection in tape, before swinging him around and throwing him at the two Grimm. Indiscriminate shock. Say goodbye. Kaminari unleashed a massive electric attack at both of the apes, electrocuting them both. The two beasts screamed at the top of their lungs before they quickly died and their bodies turned into black smoke. Kaminari's face planted onto the ground, and Ida came running up to check on him. Kaminari, are you okay? Ida picked up Kaminari and turned him around, only to be met with derp face. We Kaminari responded. Meanwhile, Mina was still trying to talk Sanson into letting her go. Kid, look. The villains are gone. You can let go now. Mayor Sanson said. It was at that moment that the ground started to rumble. Coming just into view, running down the streets, was a horde of Baofs. About 70. All running at them. Oh. Shit. Sero looked at the oncoming horde with absolute fear shining in his eyes. Language. Ida shouted at his ally. Really? Now? Sero was honestly shocked that Ida would still be concerned about such things. A hero should never let loose such profanities, even in the face of danger. Ida rationalized, before tucking Kaminari under his arm. Heroes should also know when they are outmatched. Like just now. Grab Mina and run. And with that, Ida took off in the opposite direction. Eh? How am I gonna do that? She's covered in acid. Sero shouted at Ida, but he was already too far away. Damn it. Knowing he couldn't just leave Mina there, Sero shot his tape out at her, covering her in tape before using his other arm to swing away through the air, beginning Mina with him. However, Sanson quickly dissolved the tape, causing Mina to go hurtling to the ground before Sero's tape caught her again. Ah. Could you please stop dropping me? Mina felt like she was gonna vomit, not only from being swung around on tape but from constantly falling and being lifted up again every time Sanson ate through his tape and he had to catch her again. Sorry. If you can't tell, this is really hard, and there's a horde of demons after us. Sero turned back to see the Beowulfs were gaining on them. Mina looked at the oncoming horde of red-eyed death and knew she needed to get the kid off of her. Hey, kid ... what's your name? Mina asked as calmly as she could. Sanson. The girl said. Oh, that sounds like a great name for a ... girl. Mina was unsure of the gender of this living blob of acid, but the voice she used sounded feminish. You are a girl, right? Sanson formed a head near Mina's face and nodded. Okay, Sanson, do you like heroes? Mina asked her. Sanson nodded. I want a wahoo. Well, then you need to let me go, Mina told her in a gentle tone before she looked at the horde. I know they're scary, but I can't just lie here and do nothing. A hero has to be brave. Can you do that for me, Sanson? Be a brave little hero? How? Sanson repeated. I don't want to hurt anyone. My quirks everything. I know. Mina smiled at her kindly. Acid can really make a mess sometimes. My quirk makes acid too. But I use my acid to take down bad guys and save people. So acid can be used for good too. And I'll show you how if you let me go. There were a few moments of silence before Mina felt Sanson's acid started to move off of her, and the girl came off her and fell to the ground below, with the Beowulfs coming at her. Wait. I didn't mean like that. Mina shouted. The Beowulfs quickly descended upon Sanson, with 3 of them lunging at her, with their claws extended out. Only for them to be grabbed out of the air by Sanson's newly formed tentacles, and shoved into her acid body, where they struggled a bit before dissolving away. Sanson expanded herself, getting bigger and bigger, until she was the size of a bus, and faced off against the army of Beowulfs. They never stood a chance. Sero stopped swinging and brought the both of them to the ground, where they just sat and watched in shock as Sanson tore through the demon like wolves, swallowing them in her acid, slamming them around with dozens of her tentacles, forming weapons out of her body, and using them to crush and slice the Beowulfs by the dozens. Oh wow ... she's really killing those things. Sero could only watch in awe as the massacre unfolded in front of him. Ida ran up to them with Kaminari still in his arms. What is with the class president watched as Sanson beheaded 6 Beowulfs, with an acid axe, at the same time as she impaled 12 Beowulfs with her acid tentacles. At the same time she dragged some Beowulfs into her body, while also forming a massive acid mouth to swallow 5 more Beowulf. By now Sanson just looked like a massive acid monster that was brutally killing everything in her path. Should we ... stop her? This would be vigilantism ... wouldn't it? Ida sounded more hesitant than he should have. Stop her? Dude, she's almost done. Sero informed him. I think all we could do is just watch the slaughter. Back in the observation room. You ... were not wrong. She is quite terrifying. Momo admitted with wide, frightened eyes as she and the class witnessed Sanson's slimy slaughter. Did you really fight her, Uraraka? Asui couldn't imagine trying to fight Sanson. To think this is the same kid that was turned into soup at that Tika Pride. Yeah ... it wasn't fun. Uraraka gave a nervous laugh. Even with my new quirk upgrade, I couldn't beat her if she was in full acid mode. This is the reason we decided that fighting Sanson should not be part of the exercise. Nezu sipped his tea. Of course I did not intend for this to happen either. Sanson is going off script. I apologize. Sanson must have not liked the fact that she was the only one to not have any action. She's very fond of fighting, you see, and not very fond of ... staying still. Izuku sighed. Although I can't really blame her. Well, it looks like that was the last of the Grim, Nezu commented. The exercise is over, so let's call them back. A few minutes later, after everyone was called back, Nezu spoke up. That exercise did not go as intended, but I think you understood the point of it. Sometimes children will look to you for comfort, sometimes in a physical way, such as attempting to hug you. This however may impede your ability to perform your job as a hero, or it will just kill you. There are unfortunate cases of children attempting to hug people, only for their quirks to end up killing the person they were attempting to hug. Izuku remembered Eri's story and felt a pang of sadness run through him. So while you may want to comfort a child in distress, it would be best to employ caution if you can, Nezu told them. Mina pouted, but stayed silent, out of fear of provoking Nezu. So using your words to calm a distressed child is a valuable skill, one that may end up saving your life, Nezu told them. Of course afterward the correct response would not be to let them take down the villain themselves, but given the swiftness in which she dispatched her foes, I will look the other way on this once. And with that, congratulations. You have all passed. Very well done. These exercises were hard, however, the real-life situations will be so much harder. So keep your wits about you. Now, time for lunch. The bell rang, and the students were dismissed. All right. Now I know what you're thinking. Did I really rickroll you a day after April Fools? The answer is yes. Yes, I did. Sorry I was a day late, things happened and so I couldn't upload it on the intended day. It's still a full chapter, Sanson cut it short, because she's too OPGG. But in all honesty, the reason it was so short was because of Sanson being hard to write for this. You see, the only way to stop her would be to use a quirk to immobilize her, however immobilizing her would probably trigger bad memories, which Izuku wouldn't allow. So basically I couldn't have her fight the UA students at all, so this was the best I came up with. Anyway, the next chapter is the end of the UA arc. It's most likely gonna be a long one and may take a while. Chapter 41. An overdue talk. Bakugo was seething. When he first woke up in the infirmary, he was confused. That kid, that 40-foot, three-headed kid, had called himself a Midoriya, and said that Deku was his father. There were so many reasons that didn't make sense, it boggled his mind. The chief among those reasons being, who the actual hell would want to make kids with Deku? Of course, there was the possibility that Deku adopted a kid, but how and why would Deku do that? Why would Auntie Inka let him do that? In the end, he decided that just thinking about it wouldn't get him anywhere and that he needed to confront Izuku himself. But that ended up getting him nowhere, too. Suddenly the terrified shaking loser that he used to be able to make piss himself with a flare, had the nerve to tell him to wait. Without even so much as a stutter. It only made his confusion about the situation even worse. It was like Deku had become a completely different person with a completely different life in the many months since he last saw him. And before he could get any answers, that rat principal sent him away. So all he could do while he was waiting in the infirmary, was seethe in anger and wonder how the fuck this happened. Fortunately for him, he wouldn't have to wait much longer. The doors to the infirmary opened and in walked Aizawa, who immediately made his way over to the short-tempered blonde. Midoriya's ready to talk to you. He's in one of the teachers' lounges, waiting for you. Aizawa informed him. I would have liked for him to stay here for a while longer, but I'll go get his crutches. Recovery Girl said. I don't need any Fuhai. Bakugo was bonked on the head by Recovery Girl's cane. Quite. Recovery Girl said before going to get the crutches. A few minutes later, Bakugo, now using his crutches, was following behind Aizawa as he leads him to the teacher's lounge where Izuku was located. I hope you realize how fortunate you are that Midoriya is even entertaining you after all you did to him, Aizawa told him. He doesn't owe you anything. Why the hell do you care? Bakugo snapped. He had been on thin ice since he got to UA and so he'd been trying not to shout at the teachers, but he honestly couldn't hold it in anymore. Since when did any of you assholes care about shitty Deku? All my fucking life you teachers told me that I was fucking unstoppable and kissed the ground I walked on and that Deku was lower than dirt. Then I come to UA, The place that's supposed to be for the best of the best, and now Deku's somehow calling the fucking shots and I'm being treated like shit! I guess this really must be that confusing, for you. The world suddenly must seem like it flipped upside down. Tell me Bakugo, did you bother finding out what happened to your old schools, teachers, classmates, and principals? Aizawa asked, the confusion on Bakugo's face telling him that he didn't. The schools were shut down, and the staff were all given jail sentences ranging from 12 years on the lower end to 34 years on the higher end. And the classmates that were confirmed were giving varying punishments depending on the severity of their actions, with some things being put on their records that would make finding a good school a very difficult task. Out of everyone though, you got off the luckiest, by Midoriya's request. Bakugo's eyes widened slightly with a bit of shock. Do you know why we cracked down so hard on those schools and the people in them? Aizawa asked. Because quirk discrimination is a plague that we've been trying to kill for ages. It has no place in modern-day society or any society for that matter. Schools and teachers that display these values are to be treated with no sympathy because they do this. Aizawa gestured to Bakugo, showing that Bakugo was the this he was referring to. Bakugo, by all means, you are not at all the worst kind of person on the planet, not even close, Aizawa told him, once again shocking Bakugo. You don't sexually harass female students, you don't cheat on exams or tests, you assist your classmates during the exercises, and heck, even when you were assaulting Midoriya, as horrible as that was, you took care to never let the injuries you caused him to become debilitating or lethal, and with your quirk that would require so effort on your part. Of course I didn't want the fucking nerd dead. Bakugo said as if he was insulted by Aizawa's statement. You could have been a much more heroic person than you are now. Maybe even the top student. The problem was that you were raised in a toxic environment. Aizawa told him. You lived in your own little world in which everyone told you were a king, and where quirkless people like Izuku were nothing and deserved to be discriminated against. But now that that world is gone, you're left in the real world struggling to figure out which way's up and which way's down. Bakugo didn't know how to feel about that. He wanted to deny it. Say that Aizawa didn't know what he was talking about. He didn't want to admit that maybe he really was wrong. But he wasn't an idiot. He saw the way people around him looked at him. Teachers, staff, and especially students. It was like there was something wrong with him, like he was a disease or something. And even some of the students at his previous schools and his own parents gave him those looks in the past. He'd never given it much thought other than just labeling them as losers and moving on. But he sure didn't feel like a winner now. People are telling you things that are contrary to what you've grown up believing, and as such you're resisting. Which is why we're being so harsh. Aizawa continued. It's not because we necessarily hate you, it's because we need to get through your extremely thick skull that it's not okay for heroes to think that they can hurt innocent people. Bakugo grits his teeth but doesn't respond. The rest of the short walk to the lounge was silent. After a few minutes, they reached a door with the Woods Teacher's Lounge written on it. Aizawa turned to Bakugo and gave the teen a stern look. Midoriya is inside. Before you go in, there are things you need to know. TCH. Just spit it out. Bakugo growled. He just wanted to talk to Izuku already. First I'll be waiting outside, meaning I'll hear you if you shout of any threats or use your quirk. Both of those things will be met with disciplinary actions. Aizawa explained. Bakugo gave a light growl. He knew he was going to have to try real hard to restrain himself. Second, it probably wouldn't take much on Midoriya's part to get you expelled. Aizawa continued. That made Bakugo freeze up for a moment. As shock and a bit of fear coursed through him, at the thought of Izuku being able to get him expelled from UA, his dream school. The only reason you were allowed into this school in the first place is because the Midoriyas didn't take legal action against you. And I have a feeling that there is more to what you did to him than what we know of. Depending on what it is, that by itself could get you expelled. And if Midoriya wanted to take legal action against you, then you'd definitely be expelled. Aizawa explained. So I'd suggest you watch yourself while you're speaking to him. Your future depends on it. And with that, Aizawa moved aside, making way for Bakugo to enter. Bakugo hesitated for a moment but quickly buried any fear that may have been lurking within him, and his face settled into his standard scowl. And so he entered. The teacher's lounge was nothing special. Just a few chairs, some stuff for making tea and coffee, and 2 couches that faced each other with a glass table in between. Izuku was there, sitting on one of the couches, doing paperwork seemingly, with a cup of coffee beside him. When Bakugo entered, Izuku looked up, and their eyes met. Deku. Bakugo growled. Izuku didn't respond at first, at least not verbally. Instead, he took a deep breath and then took a long sip of his coffee. Once he put the coffee down, he looked back up at Bakugo and said, "My name is Midoriya." Again, Bakugo was taken aback. Izuku hadn't asked him to stop calling him Deku since before even middle school. And even then he'd always asked him to call him Izuku, not Midoriya. If Bakugo didn't feel like he was talking to a completely different person before, he definitely thought that now. This wasn't the Izuku Midoriya he'd known, and he might actually have to watch his step. The shock Bakugo was feeling must have shown on his face because Izuku picked up on it and decided to explain himself. "It's really not good for either of us if I let you keep calling me useless," Izuku told him. "And as much as I hate to say it, I can't really call us friends right now. So to you, for now. It's Midoriya." Bakugo didn't respond. He didn't really know how to respond. His pride wouldn't let him capitulate and do what Izuku said, but he was too smart to just ignore him. So he just kept his mouth shut. After a bit of silence, Izuku spoke again. "We're going to be here for a while, so you'd probably want to take a seat. TCH. Bakugo did just that, sitting down on the couch opposite to Izuku, and continued to silently glare at him. He looked down for a moment at the papers Izuku was fiddling with before. It was definitely paperwork, and there were some pictures of people on them. "Alright, now. I did promise you an explanation," Izuku said, regaining Bakugo's attention. "But we have to establish something first. I am not the same person I was when you last saw me." "No shit." Bakugo spat. "I have kids now, so I had to look at things differently." Bakugo had just taken notice of something. Izuku's tone, the way he spoke was all very tired. As if he hadn't slept for days. And his face reflected that tiredness. "That includes you. You see, I can't just let you walk over me like I used to or keep praising you when you really don't deserve it. And I can't let you continue to stay how you are." Bakugo felt his anger spike, and he let out a growl. "What the fuck do they don't know about the suicide baiting?" Izuku interrupted him. Bakugo felt like he got hit with a bucket of cold water, as he realized what Izuku just said, and what that implied. "If I told them this, your future would be over," Izuku said. His tone was dead serious. "I have no intention of ever letting that out. But I need to know you're improving. That you won't stay the same, violent, angry, seemingly psychopathic person you've shown me you can be. I've always wanted you to be a hero, but I can't afford to just roll over and let you do as you please and just hope you'll get better. Bakugo, if you do anything out of line, there will be consequences. And if you lose it, and attack me, then I'm telling them about what you said, and I'll be done with you, for good." Bakugo was shell-shocked. The situation he was in was now clear to him. Izuku had all the power, and he couldn't do anything about it. It was so bizarre, that he honestly couldn't feel anything but shock for a bit. Eventually, though, his anger rose, spiking harder than he had felt it go in a long time. Anger at Deku thinking he was above him. Anger at Deku actually having power over him. Anger at the nonsensical world that gave Deku that power. and anger at himself for not being able to do anything about it. His hands started heating up, smoking as his quirk started reacting to his emotions. He wanted so badly to use his quirk, to shout and scream, and put Deku back in his place. But if he did that, then everything he worked for would be for naught. And his dream would be dead. After a few minutes, Bakugo managed to rein in his anger a bit, and his hands stopped smoking. Once Izuku was sure Bakugo had fully gotten himself under control, he gave his former friend a small smile. Good. I needed to see that your dream was still more important to you than your pride. Just tell me what the hell happened to you. Bakugo at this point honestly wanted to leave more than he wanted to hear about what the hell caused this change in Izuku, but he knew he would regret that once he got his emotions more under control later. And he also didn't want to risk just storming out on Izuku. Alright, we don't have all the time in the world and it is a long story, so I should really start now, I guess. Izuku took another sip of his coffee and prepared himself. Alright, so do you remember how I was when you last saw me at school? Yeah, you looked. Bakugo wanted to say fucking pathetic, but he decided against it. Miserable. More than usual. Well there's a reason for that. You see, funny story. You weren't the first one to get attacked by the sludge villain. Izuku revealed, now looking a bit more sheepish. I was what? Bakugo didn't know where this was going, but he had a feeling it was gonna piss him off. I was attacked by the sludge villain before you, while I was walking home from school, Izuku repeated. And I was saved by All Might. Wait. If All Might already took down the fucking villain before he even got to me, then how the hell did he get away? Bakugo knew that escaping All Might was practically impossible, so he really didn't see how that same villain could have also attacked him. Well All Might captured the villain by putting him in bottles and then putting them in his pockets and I wanted to ask All Might a question, but he was kinda already about to jump away, and so I held on to his legs, which caused the bottles to slip out mid-jump and so the villain got out. Izuku looked away from Bakugo as he explained this, too embarrassed and ashamed to look him in the eye while he said this. You what? Bakugo shouted at him. His palms were smoking again, and he very nearly let off an explosion. You mean, I almost died because your stupid ass wanted to ask All Might a question? Izuku gave Bakugo a stern look, reminding him of where he stood. Be careful, Bakugo. Honestly, Izuku would have been more than fine about Bakugo shouting at him for that. He was sure he deserved it. But he couldn't allow Bakugo to get too out of line. Bakugo took another few moments to calm himself down before he leaned back in his chair. After a bit more time passed, Izuku continued. The question I wanted to ask All Might. I asked him if I could be a hero. And he said no. Bakugo knew the world was upside down, but he was pretty sure one thing was the same: Deku couldn't be a hero. He said no, Izuku confirmed with a saddened sigh. It still hurt to talk about even after all this time. So that's why you looked like someone got killed in front of you every time I saw you, Bakugo said. There was so much more that he wanted to say, but he bit his tongue and held it all in. For the sake of his own dream. Yeah. I fell into depression, things just went gray. Izuku had a tough time describing his depressed period. It was all just a blur of sadness and despair, that he didn't often want to think about. I just couldn't deal with anything anymore, so I eventually just stopped bothering to go to school. I just stayed home and wallowed in my own despair until Eri knocked on my door. Izuku picked up his phone and showed the screen to Bakugo, where he saw a picture of Eri around a few weeks after he'd taken her in. That's that brat you saved from the Yakuza, right? Bakugo still couldn't believe what he just said. I heard about that. What, did you fucking adopt her too? Yes, Izuku said, putting the phone away. She was being chased by the head of the Yakuza, Kaichizaki aka Overhaul, For reasons that I can't really tell you, but let's just say that if he caught her she would have been basically tortured in the worst way possible, and imprisoned. So he was a piece of shit. Bakugo summarized, basically yeah, the worst kind of scum that you can imagine. Izuku gladly confirmed. But he was powerful, both with his quirk and his influence. His quirk allowed him to take apart and put back together anything he wanted in any way he wanted on a molecular level. Meaning that he's capable of cleaning up crime scenes so thoroughly that law enforcement can't even find a trace of him. So the heroes and the police had a hard time finding evidence against him. I hid Eri and set my phone to record and hid that too, then I pretended to be asleep. So when he eventually left, I had evidence of him breaking in, which the heroes used as a reason to search his base, which broke out into a full-out raid when they fought back. All Might was there during the raid, so they didn't really stand a chance. TCH. Looks like you actually can think once in a while. Bakugo would never have admitted this, not even to himself, but he probably would have handled that situation a lot worse. Of course the only time you can save someone is by running away and hiding. Yeah but I did end up saving her. Which brings me to the next part of the story, DOC, or as they were called at the time, OPCCC. Izuku hadn't said that name in a while. That's a stupid fucking name, Bakugo said immediately. That's why they changed it. Anyway, they were responsible for dealing with children who had dangerous quirks. Eri was once such child, so they gave me the option to adopt her. Izuku explained. You're fucking 15, that's a terrible idea. Bakugo pointed out. Well they didn't have many other options. Not many people want to adopt kids that might kill them. Izuku coughed, and quickly took another sip of his coffee. I said yes, and so I took Eri under my care. Where was Auntie Inko? Why the hell did she let you do something that stupid? Bakugo asked if there was one person he knew should care about Izuku, it was Inko, so how could she allow this to happen? Mom was really worried about me. She wasn't going to be around for a while, and I was so depressed before she left. I think she knew that if I had Eri around, I would be more active and less sad. Izuku answered. Although I don't think she could have imagined what would happen next. What did you run into another kid being used by a villain? Bakugo asked sarcastically. Yeah, actually. Izuku smirked. At Bakugo's shocked expression, the "are you shitting me" look was so evident on his face that it almost made him laugh. Not too long after I got Eri, I went to a supermarket with her to buy some things, and a villain attacked using another child's quirk to turn everyone to stone. Her name is Izuku showed him a picture of her while they were selling food at the food stand. After shooting the villain with a tranquilizer dart. Wait, why the hell did you have a tranq gun? Bakugo asked him. Eri's quirk is ... Well, I said before, it's dangerous and she basically had no control over it. If her quirk went off by accident or she couldn't turn it off during her training, then she could very easily kill someone by accident. So the only way to turn it off at that point is with ... Well, the tranq gun. Izuku hated talking about the tranq gun. He felt a lot better about it now than he did before. Since Eri had better control over her quirk, Izuku felt like he was less likely to use it, which put him at ease a bit. Bakugo also seemed to understand the necessity of it and stayed silent. So after I rescued her, I adopted her because she also fell under DOC's jurisdiction, and I really just didn't know how to say no to her and Eri. Izuku sighed. It was also at that point that DOC started to realize I had a weakness when it came to the kids and started being more ... pushy. They only got more and more forceful with each kid I happened to find. Wait, you telling me this shit happened again? Bakugo asked in disbelief. How many fucking parents just dump their kids onto the streets? Way too many, Izuku answered, although in his eyes any amount of kids being abandoned on the street was way too many. Anyway, after bumping into a few more kids, DOC fully realized that they could give all of the kids under their custody to me. And so I signed a contract that would put me in charge of a new organization, in charge of taking care of any OPCs, whose parents either couldn't keep them or no longer wanted to keep them. I would get a very generous amount of government funding, a large house capable of fitting that many children, and a lot of other benefits. But in return, I would have to do this for the rest of my life, and take in every single child taken by DOC without the ability to refuse. I decided the course of my life when I signed that. So let me get this straight. You through some freak coincidence, kept finding abandoned kids with overpowered quirks, and the government saw an opportunity to dump all their unwanted brats on you because they knew you wouldn't fucking say now, and so you signed your life away so you're stuck babysitting until you fucking die. Bakugo summarized. Izuku sighed, massaging the bridge of his nose to try and fight off a headache that was developing. Not how I would put it. And don't call them unwanted brats. Ever. There was a moment of silence between them, as Bakugo took a minute to fully take that in. You really did give up, huh? Bakugo had tried for years to get Izuku to give up on his dream, and he honestly thought that at this point only death would get Izuku to stop. It turns out all it would take was All Might himself. That guy really could do anything. But it just seemed that something was wrong about it. Maybe in a vacuum, he would consider that to be a good thing, but now it was just another thing that changed, adding to the feeling that his life before UA might have well been like Heizawa said, another world entirely. What else could I do? Trying to be a hero while quirkless would have been hard enough, but trying to be a quirkless hero while also raising 5 kids and giving them all the attention they needed, that would have been impossible. And unfair to them. Bakugo had never heard Izuku sound so defeated. And that said a lot. It was like he really was watching a dream die in front of him. And that caused a bolt of fear to course through him, as a pesky stray thought asked the question. Could that be me? Bakugo shook his head to try and rid himself of the thought. No. I could never be as pathetic as Deku. However, once again, another stray thought made him pause. But what would you do, if he expelled you right now? Bakugo refused to give that any thought. At least if I took this offer, I could still be useful. I could help these kids. Izuku continued. So after reading the contract through and through, I signed. And so now I'm the official caretaker for all OPC children given up by their parents. Which is why I moved, by the way. Every now and then, DOC will hand me new children to take care of from their facilities, like I. Bakugo growled at the mention of the Kaiju boy, as he still was feeling the pain done to both his body and pride. So, when's the part where you became buddy-buddy with fucking All Might, ratted out the school, and became the head of some other fucking government branch or some shit? And where the hell is Auntie Inko? Well, to start with, All Might, when I gave the evidence to the police they put me under witness protection. All Might was the first hero who volunteered to guard us. And after that, I kept running into him. I think he feels bad about telling me I can't be a hero. Although I don't really think he should. Izuku explained. And as for Mom, well, she used a lot of the money we acquired to start her own company. It's doing pretty well. Right now she's overseas working to try and raise it up even more. So far that was the only thing Izuku had said that made Bakugo even the slightest bit happy. Well, at least she's doing fine. She deserves it for having to put up with Deku's worthless ass. Also, I never really ratted out the school. Izuku corrected. After the heroes figured out I was quirkless and that I hadn't gone to school in a while, they got suspicious and started investigating. It didn't take them too long to figure out about the quirk discrimination. Bakugo paused. That makes sense. I still don't see why they should fucking care, but since they do for some goddamn reason, it makes sense they take one look at Deku's ass while he's out of school and see that something was up. Also, I want to say, I am not the head of a government branch, Izuku said sternly. You could say that I am unofficially in charge of the quirk removal branch and I do decide who gets their quirks erased, but on paper, I'm not at all in charge of it. Wait, the what branch? Bakugo wasn't sure he heard it correctly. He had to have misheard it because there was no way what he heard was true. The quirk removal branch. We wanted to keep it a secret for a while, but that was pretty pointless. Eventually, people were going to find out about others suddenly losing their quirks. The government hasn't announced the branch to the public yet, but Izuku didn't get a chance to finish as Bakugo uninterrupted him. What the fuck do you mean, quirk removal? Don't just brush past that. How the fuck are removing quirks? And why the fuck are you in charge of it? Bakugo was feeling a mix of confusion, anger, and fear. Because now he knew Izuku could do so much worse than just expel him. Well, unfortunately, both the way in which quirks are removed and the reason I have so much influence are on a strictly need-to-know basis. Izuku made sure his tone conveyed that there was no room for argument. If the knowledge that Yuri's blood was the key ingredient to making the quirk erasing formula, then countless people would come after her, and do the same thing Overhaul did. The poor girl would probably never be able to step outside again. But you don't need to worry about your quirk being erased. Quirk erasure isn't a punishment, although the government is trying to convince me to say otherwise, but for now, the only people whose quirks we're interested in getting rid of are people whose quirks simply cannot allow them to live normally around other people, without a significant chance of them accidentally killing them. Basically, quirks belonging to level 2 OCPs. People with quirks more dangerous than the level 1 OCPs you've seen like I. That didn't make Bakugo much calmer. To him, he still saw it as his fate being at Izuku's mercy. Which was an uncomfortable thought to say the least. I think ... that covers everything. Izuku gave a relieved sigh. A lot has changed, it's almost unbelievable even for me. It ''s ... very different from how I thought my life would be ... Kaken, I want to see you become a great hero. Not once during this talk did you lash out at me or attack me. You can improve. I know that. But ... until then, I would like to stay away from each other. Right now you're not really a good influence for my kids ... Also they hate you, so for now it's best to go our separate ways. Tch ... Fine. The less I have to see you the better. Bakugo grumbled. Can I get out of here now? I'm fucking starving. Izuku nodded, and Bakugo picked up his crutches, and walked over to the door, and left without looking back. The green-haired father immediately sunk into his seat, as all the tension he'd been feeling melted away. In truth, he had been more than a bit nervous about meeting with Bakugo. He didn't think that Bakugo would attack him. He was somewhat confident that his old friend was smart enough not to ruin his own future. But he also wouldn't have thought his old friend would have turned into such a bully. So there was a bit of doubt. Still, he knew Bakugo would need to be dealt with. He knew that the explosive blonde was quite stubborn, and if he wanted to find him then he very well might. And the last thing Izuku wanted was Bakugo getting near his house, only to be met with his children and likely an army of Grimm. That would not end well for anyone. However, his relief was short-lived, as suddenly he felt a strong pain in his chest. Gah! Izuku clutched his chest in pain, but it didn't last long, as soon the pain vanished just as quickly as it came. Izuku struggled for breath for a bit, sweat dripping down his face as he suddenly felt very hot. After another few minutes, everything went back to normal and fell to the side, now completely laying down on the couch. I ... should see a doctor, Izuku concluded. He felt so tired, and he could feel his eyes closing and he knew he couldn't stop them. LL ... make an appointment ... eventually. And so everything went black. Okay, so change of plans. I'm most likely going to cut the conclusion to the UA arc in 2, maybe even 3. The conversation with Bakugo took longer than expected. Also, if anyone expected Bakugo bashing, then I apologize, but that's not gonna happen. I hate the act of bashing characters in fics. It basically turns a three-dimensional character with motives and reasons behind their actions into ridiculously out-of-character parodies of themselves that are overall much less interesting than the actual character. Mind you, I'm not saying you can't bash a character, nor am I saying that having character bashing makes a story trash by any means. It just, in my opinion, lowers the quality of the story by removing depth from a character. And before anyone points it out, yes, I do have a rule in my fics that Overhaul has to die in all of the fics I write him in, but I wouldn't call that bashing. Overhaul stays in character the entire time, and isn't portrayed to be more cartoonishly evil than he already is. Since we're talking about out-of-character actor, Izuku has grown to be sterner and less tolerant in certain situations, and that shines here. He's doing it not for his sake but for Bakugo's, because in his eyes, he has to be more stern and strict, otherwise Bakugo won't improve. And when Izuku said he doesn't want Bakugo around, that was mostly for Bakugo and the children's sake. It's not like he personally wants Bakugo to stay away from him. Oh, and in case you're wondering, that wasn't the collapse. Izuku's health problems are just beginning to surface more and then passed out because he was tired. The collapse is gonna be much more obvious, and much worse.